What does that mean? I'm sorry.
Never was.
Why would Hashem say that?
Never was, understand. It was a big miracle. It was a big thing.
Because to say that there were locusts in Egypt is not a miracle.
No, so that is solved by saying there has never been such a thing.
But in other words, if it happened 4 years later, or 20 years later, or 100 years later, it doesn't prove that it was God either. God is not God because He does a miracle the first time around and everybody else can do the miracle. The proof here of these 10 plagues is no one else could do that.
By frogs we were not told that. By frogs we were told that there was never such a thing.
The miracle was the frogs came, and then the frogs jumped out of the Yar, and they were all over the place, and then they jumped back. You're right, and that's true. So the answer is there's a progression with the plagues. As you go through the plagues from plague 1 to plague 10, they become more strict and more unusual and more special and more unique. So this is already towards the end. This is plague number 8.
I see. Okay.
So let me one comment that I really want to show you the other alternative. Yes.
When it says lo ken, it doesn't say it doesn't say size. It could be type like by Yoel.
But that's the answer. So Rashi's answer is that's exactly the point. There never was a plague of this kind of locust ever again. Now with Yoel, it happened. Let's say there was 1 million locusts in the days of Moshe. In the days of Yoel, there was 1.5 million, but there really were only 300,000 Arben, 300,000 Yelek, and 300,000 Gazam, and 300,000 of the other one. So each one was just, there had to be a confluence of different species that were flying through different swarms. They swarmed together. And they swarm by species.
So your deal
it wasn't a size issue. It wasn't that there were more locusts by Yoel.
Correct.
Than by Moshe, it was just there were different locusts.
Right, correct. Well, not that, or they're different, but included the type of from Moshe as one of the 4.
Yeah.
Right. That's what Rashi's saying. Now you could interpret this in all kinds of ways, and if I can get to it, I want to show you some of the other ways. You got a quick question?
Well, I'm looking and thinking. So why 1? What's the relevance here?
Why this one?
Why does it matter if it was 1 or 4?
Maybe this was. Well, the other issue we'll see is that Yoel is talking about Israel. This is talking about Egypt. Maybe this was the one that frequented Egypt or that didn't frequent Egypt. Right? It's like saying, there's African lions and then there are Indian lions, or there are, I don't know. There are different kind of dogs live in different kind of countries, or different kinds of animals are related but not related. They're different. So in other words, maybe this was the kind that was there, but never happened in so many absolutely large numbers. So at any rate, so that's what Rashi says. And Ramban doesn't really like it because, in other words, what does this really mean that there was, it says that there was Chasil, and the Chasil did it, and they were Arbeh. So the Ramban doesn't really feel that Rashi is making a good separation between the two. And he suggests, I'm just going to skip a line to his Viulai, and possibly Yomar Harav, maybe what Rashi is really saying, She'emin Harbe Shemoshe Gadol Mishel Yoel. Maybe what Moshe is saying that the number, in other words, this is what it is. It's not that he's simply explaining Rashi that there were large numbers of the Arbe was larger than Yoel, and numbers of the other Minim, not the Arbe, was larger in the days of Yoel. But he doesn't like, he says, and this is, however, these are Dvarim B'Teilim. However, the Ramban says as follows. What's the pshat? Aval b'chol gvul Mitzrayim nimshach. So what's the key here? Is that it's dealing with the area of Egypt. And even what it says before, and even what will happen later in the future. Lo hayabo kain arbeh kamov yachvav liyakain. There never will be this amount of arbeh in the land of Egypt itself, never before, and never again will be this many arbeh in Egypt. And the Ramban suggests that there is not a lot of locusts that would attack Egypt. Ramban is saying, based upon what they know, what he knew about the climate and the environment and the ecology of Egypt, they did not get a whole lot of locusts. I'm not quite sure if that's true or not true. He says it is true. Why? Because it's very wet. There won't be a lot of locusts. Locusts like where they can land and they can chomp on dry land on the produce. Locusts tend to fly in when there's no rain. And there's no moisture. It's not a damp climate, and in fact, as in case in Yoel, specifically where there was a drought that was happening as well, and after the drought, when everybody was suffering, then Yoel says there will become all these locusts and different types of locusts and grasshoppers, and that's one on top of the other. In Mitzrayim, therefore, that there was unusual to have locusts altogether. So it's not that this was the largest locust attack in the world. This was the largest locust attack in Egypt, right? This was make things unusual, that it happened in Egypt. And Ramban says, V'kas Rabbeinu Chanana b'Parashat Torah Shelo, and Rabbeinu Chanana writes in his commentary on the Torah, Mi'et atirat Moshe Rabbeinu, from the time that Moshe prayed, Aviyad Akshav prayed to bring the locusts and have them go away, until now, Ein Arbeh Mazik b'chol Gvul Mitzrayim. There are no Arbeh in Gvul Mitzrayim. Rabbeinu Chanana came from North Africa, so he might have known more about what happens in Egypt. V'im koreshu nofel ba'ar b'Eretz Yisrael above v'nechnas b'Gvul Mitzrayim. And if it happens that the locusts come attack Israel, as there are locusts, there were locust plagues, and there were locust swarms that it did land in Israel for over the centuries, including in the 20th centuries when the settlers first moved in. We don't see that anymore as much. If they ever get to Egypt, we don't find that the locusts attack Egypt. And the Rabbi Nachman says this is everybody knows this, and it says and this is why the locusts flew away. They never remained after that in Egypt. So the miracle was, the locusts normally do not appear. Second of all, that the locusts that came were very large. And second of all, and here's what Rabbeinu Chananel is adding, when the locusts left, they never came back. They checked out, but they never checked back in. Okay? In other words, not only was the miracle that they came, the miracle was that after this, they never saw locusts again in Egypt. There had been small swarms, and this was the largest one, but there never were, not that there never were large swarms, there never were swarms in Egypt again. That's what Rabbeinu Chananel is suggesting, and for all the centuries subsequent. He says the climate just wasn't conducive to it, and if they came, they only ate a little bit, and they didn't really stay for a whole long time.
So you're saying as of today, there hasn't been a swarm of the...
In Egypt, in what was then Egypt proper. That's what Rabbeinu Chananel suggests. Okay? Now, so far in other words, what he's really saying basically is according to Rashi, the differences between the type of locust, whether it was Arbe or the four kinds. According to Rabbeinu Chananel and the Ramban, it looks like we're talking about the land itself. In Egypt, there never was a swarm this large. And in Israel, that's the story of Yoel. That was in Israel. So that's different lands, different countries. You can't compare apples and oranges. They're different kinds of environments and ecology. And then Rabbeinu Chananel says, and even on top of that, there never were locusts after that. The locusts left, they never came back. Okay, and now hold on to your pants, okay? Because now we're going to come to the part that deals with the Tzvardeya. You holding on to your pants? Okay, good. So this is this was the teaser. I said that there's a part that comes in here about the Tzvardeya. So the basic premise that Rabbeinu Chananel says is the locusts left and they never came back. I don't necessarily deny this to be wrong. Maybe if they came in small numbers. But he says just not a conducive. And plus, remember, the land of Egypt that we're talking about is not what we call today Egypt in Africa. It's much more centered around the Nile Delta. The reason that Egypt is always the place where the Joseph and his brothers and his father wanted to go down was because there was no famine there. Why was there no famine? Because the Nile Delta, where the Nile comes into the Mediterranean Ocean, is very fertile. So that's actually a fairly damp land. That's why they prayed to the Nile. That's why they looked at the Nile as their god. We're not dealing here with the southern part of Egypt, which is probably still wilderness in the days of Pharaoh, where Moses ran off to when he runs away from Pharaoh's palace. That was uncharted territory. That was the deep Africa or dark Africa, so to speak. So says the Ramban, and this is different. This plague that came and left and never came back is different than the plague of the Tzvardeya. Okay, stay with this, and I'm not even quite sure they're going to translate this to you. So, Bo'urei, come and look, says the Ramban. Eitzlat Tzvardiyim, Omar. With the Tzvardiyim it says, Rak Bayor Tisha Arno, that they will remain in the Nile. So in other words, the Tzvardiyim remain in the Nile. What happens, on the other hand, to the locusts? They left. That's what the pasuk says. V'acharav lo yekain. There never were locusts. Not that there never were a lot of locusts. Never were locusts at all. The locusts left, and they never returned. The Tzvardeya came back to the Nile, and then he puts in. This is the head turner that everybody notices. V'lachein nishar bo. Anyone want to read the next word? Ha'al tamsiach. Al tamsiach. Now, you guys have the English. How do they translate al tamsiach? What do they translate as? Crocodiles. And therefore the Al Tamsiach is a crocodile. And therefore he says in the Sharbo that the crocodiles remain in the Nile ad achshav. Aval, let me just finish off the sentence, and you kind of can hold to see if your pants are still up. Aval eitzel harbeh, ne'mar lo nishar arbeh achad b'chol gvul Mitzrayim. No arbeh remained at all, which means not only the arbeh that floated in, they never came back. There never was any more arbeh. Whereas the plague of the Tzfardea was something remained afterwards and always remained afterwards. Okay, so this is really what the Ramban suggests. That's with the Tzfardea, something remained. With the plague of the Arben, nothing remained. But he quotes here not what you would expect to see, that the Tzfardea were the frogs that remained in the Nile. He says, what remains in the Nile? The crocodiles. Okay, now what's the implication of what the Ramban is saying? If when the Tzfardea are brought back out of the Nile into the Nile, the remainder of them is the crocodile, which is what this Al Tamtsiach is.
Crocodile ate the frogs.
So more importantly, what was the plague of the Tzfardea? The plague of the Tzfardea was not simply frogs. The plague of the Tzfardea was crocodiles. Crocodiles.
I never heard that before.
I know, that's why you had to come today. That's why I wanted to make sure you were here. And I'm going to show you the article by Rabbi Slifkin where he points out that the Ramban is not the only person who assumes that Tzfardea were crocodiles. But let's just stop for a moment. Before we kind of read the article that Slifkin wrote, let's just kind of put this back in our mind. If you kind of flip crocodiles in place of Tzfardea, in place of frogs, does it work?
Yeah, they croak also.
They also croak. They make noises when they attack, surely. They're not as croaky as frogs.
They don't work with the Midrash.
Which is?
But they were in the
Right.
ovens.
It does not work with the medrash that they jumped into the ovens. Crocodiles would have a hard time jumping into ovens, especially the ovens were not with our ovens where the door comes down. Ovens you usually came into the top, and the ovens were much smaller than our oven. Yeah. Think of the ovens like the Laffa ovens you see in the Laffa stores. So that's hard to imagine a crocodile getting in. So that doesn't work exactly, that's true.
Crocodiles kill.
Crocodiles, correct. And what's so bad about that?
That's amazing if they're Egyptian.
It's amazing if they're Egyptian, like if they swallow the Egyptians.
Yeah, they kill the Egyptians. It's great.
It's good. Why would that be bad? So that's something good or something that would be good?
Amazing.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it's bad.
No, are you kidding?
Okay, so that's good. So the good news and the bad news is, the good news and the bad news, Jeff, if you follow the progression of the plagues, they tend to go from the easier to the more difficult. You started with blood. Okay, so no one likes to drink blood, but the truth is if you drank blood, you could still survive. It's still a liquid. It has nutrients. I mean, you and I couldn't. We couldn't. Halachically, we can't ingest blood. But it's also everybody will jump back in abhorrence. But if that was the only liquid you needed to survive, you could survive. And frogs were seen as a nuisance, and lice were seen as a nuisance. And then it progresses to things that are much more difficult, like wild animals running around, crops being destroyed, famine, darkness. They couldn't move. The plague of the firstborn. So having crocodiles running around Egypt and chewing up on people sounds like something it should be towards the end rather than towards the beginning. So that's a little bit difficult. But for all intents and purposes, it could make sense. It just sounds so much different for us because we're used to the translation in the modern world that Tzfardea means frogs. Which, by the way, the word Tzfardea is an unusual term. We find the first time Tzfardea come up is here in the story of the 10 plagues. It's not like we have Tzfardea jumping all over the book of Bereshis. Right? We don't even know what the term Tzfardea comes from.
What's the frogs in Hebrew?
Tzfardea. Called Tzfardea.
Even in Israel now today.
Even in Israel they're called Tzfardea. And even in Israel today, in fact, in Israel, they usually talk about, you see these big white garbage collection cans, like these big long things, they call them Tzfardea because they paint them green. So they call them Tzfardea.
So hold on here, Moshe. Let me understand something. Every plague affected all the Egyptians.
Yes, but it didn't affect the Hebrews.
But the crocodiles could only affect Egyptians who were near the water.
No, they came out of the water. They came out of the water. That was the plague.
But the plague was frogs.
But the frogs came out of the water.
And there were crocodiles too.
Right.
So there were both.
Well, no. What the Ramban seems to be saying is that the plague, the second plague of the 10 plagues, was not the plague of frogs, as you and I believe, and everybody else believes. And everyone who comes to the Seder table with little kids brings all these frogs to the table, these little plastic frogs, right?
Frogs?
So it says the Ramban it was the Tzfardea. The word Tzfardea here does not mean frogs, means crocodile. That is blowing everybody away. Now you have to check if your socks fell down or your pants fell down because this is so unusual.
So how come we as Jews have been taking it as frogs?
Because it's very difficult to assume that they were crocodiles because at the beginning of the plague is they're easier things. Plus they jump into the ovens according to what the Torah says. Crocodiles don't jump into the ovens. But what I want to show you, and that's why I want to read this to you, is where it actually shows you that other commentaries as well believe that they were crocodiles. Yes, sir.
It was not the Midrash, it's actually in the test in the ovens.
Yes,
And
correct.
not only that,
Yes.
it says also the kneading bowls.
Yes.
So that doesn't equal crocodiles.
Well, kneading bowl, you could say that a crocodile could crawl into a kneading bowl. The ovens were actually very small. The ovens are small triangular types of things. They're not large.
Right, so how do
So
the
it
crocodiles
depends
get
on the
into
oven.
our
They would
ovens?
be very difficult. It would be very difficult to do that.
It's a difficult Ramban.
But it's what I'm trying to share with you, and that's why I want to do this
But if
now.
you're
It's not just the Ramban. It's just not just the Ramban. It's a number of other commentaries to do that.
But if you're
So here's,
talking about ovens, you're not talking about the little ovens we have here in Toronto.
I don't know what
Because
they're
in
talking about.
Morocco we have central ovens where everybody sends their food.
Okay, maybe. But still, the
So they're big,
crocodiles.
they're huge.
But still, crocodiles got to jump up and get onto it. Where did you? They open on floor level.
Yeah, there's a door like the pizza, you know, where they put the bread
But
in.
did you open them on the floor, or were they raised 4 feet off the floor?
No, they're raised, yeah.
So the
They're
crocodile will have a difficulty, even if size-wise it works, he would have difficulty climbing up into it. Crocodiles are fairly.
They could scale.
They're sorry.
Crocodiles.
Crocodiles are very immobile outside of the water. They're very slow. They're very clumsy. That's why they like to grab their prey and jump and pull it back into the water, pull it underwater.
They can drown.
Okay, here's the article, guys. Okay, let's take a look at this. This is going to be something you never saw before and you may never see again.
Just like
okay.
a locust.
Here I have a big copy of an extra big copy if someone wants to read with big glasses. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, it's only got one. Okay, so this is an article that everybody know who Rabbi Slifkin is. Natan Slifkin. He's sometimes called the zoo rabbi. Okay, he writes about what type of animal is a chauffeur, what all these kinds of things. So this is an individual who's done his research in anatomy and botany. He's actually probably should have been a biologist or a naturalist. And of course, he's a rabbi. He lives in Ramat Beit Shemesh today. He's actually come to Toronto a few times, and he has this article that was printed a number of years ago in the Jewish Bible Quarterly in 2008, I think, is the actual date of publication.
Not put in Heron?
I'm sorry?
Was he put in Heron?
He was put in Cherem, correct, because
Got
he
out?
He got out, yes, because he said things that would actually make sense. Anyway, so just to read, I'm going to go through some of this with you. The Gashi quotes the Ibn Ezra. So the second plague befall Egypt was that Tzfardea. It's widely believed the term Tzfardea refers to frogs, but Ibn Ezra notes that there are actually two views on this matter. You just found the second one in a Ramban. The commentators, here's what the Ibn Ezra says. Commentators differed in their understanding of the word Tzfardea. Many said it referred to a sort of fish found in Egypt called al-timsa in Arabic, which comes out of the river and seizes human beings. Now, a crocodile is not a fish, but you have to understand that when you talk about dog in medieval Hebrew and ancient Hebrew, anything that swims in the water is considered a dog. It's not a species. Anything that's in the water, like the fish that swallowed Jonah, could have been a whale. Okay? So others say that there are creatures found in most of the rivers and they make a sound. This explanation, which is well known, seems correct in my view. So the Ibn Ezra brings two opinions. One is the al-timsa, which you already know is a crocodile, which grabs people, and the second one is these are small animals which make a sound. That's the quote of the Ibn Ezra, which is what the Ramban said. This former explanation relates to a crocodile. The first one is regarded as fish, even though it's a reptile, because the Torah concept of fish also includes other aquatic creatures. Support for this identification is advanced from the description of how the plague ceased. The Medrash Haggadah comments in the statement, Tzfardea will remain in the river, and the Tzfardea shall retreat from you and your couriers and your people, they shall remain only in the Nile. This is what the Medrash says about the Tzfardea leaving. Rabbi Yitzchak says, there are still deadly beasts in it that emerge and kill people every year. So the Medrash actually seems to suggest, Roy, come in, that the Medrash seems to say that what is the type of animal? Not frogs. Frogs aren't deadly unless they're poison frogs, which don't exist in Egypt. Those that exist in the Amazon. But they are deadly beasts which grab and kill people. Moshe did not pray for the Tzfardim to be wiped out. Only they should not harm Pharaoh. As it says, and Moshe cried to the Lord in the manner of the Tzfardim, which he had inflicted upon Pharaoh. So in other words, it looks like the Medrash even suggests that Tzfardea is crocodiles. Rabbeinu Bachai explains at greater length. Moses' words in his prayer remain true for all time, for that time, and for all generations. In accordance with his words, they shall only remain in the Nile. To this very day, the creeping water creature known as Al-Timsa, this is Rabbeinu Bachai, who is the student of the Ramban, which who wrote the commentary as well on the Torah, remains there. There it lives, and said that sometimes it comes out of the Nile where it lives, rising up to the river's edge and swallowing whatever it finds, even within 2 or 3 humans at a time. Page 252. Okay, give Roy a copy. Okay. Even it grabs people who are too close to the Nile, even 2 or 3 humans at a time. Neither spear nor arrow can overcome its body unless aimed for its belly. Physicians say it's venomous. It's actually not venomous, but it's very sharp. The scales on the body, you can scratch yourself, and the touching its body, even after its death, is harmful to man. It is of the Tzvardeya type, and from the power of Moses, this creature remains there. This is how Rabbi Hananel explained it, and regarding this, it says, "Speak of all his wonders." That's what actually Ramban is quoting this Rabbi Hananel. According to the second identification, which is preferred by Ibn Ezra, the Tzvardeya is the commonly found animal that makes a croaking sound, the frog. This is also the explanation preferred by others, the one that you and I heard about. Some say it looks, and this is what he quotes from another Sefer HaMivchar. Some say it looks like a fish, that's the Al-Timsa, which moves its upper jaw, unlike all other lowly creatures, and seizes humans and animals passing by the river's edge. By the way, that's what's unique about crocodile. Most animals, the jaw moves down. Right, the crocodile opens its jaw, opens it very wide, and the upper jaw moves up. It moves up really out of its socket and grabs people and comes back together. It actually also exists for snakes and a number of other reptiles. But the correct explanation that they are the well-known creatures of pools, rivers and pools, which is the frogs. So some say it's a crocodile, some say it's really the frogs. And the same thing in Sefer Toda'ah. This type of destructive Tzvardeya did not exist in the Nile. Since it was created, it remained in the Egyptian river forever. It grows in the Nile to a great size, damages and swallows creatures large and small. It is the Tamsa, or the Al-Timsa, which is found in the Nile until today, as a memorial of the plague. So no, Sefer Todah is saying that this crocodile, which exists in Nile, the Nile crocodile, it's called the Nile crocodile, is the crocodile that was there to remember that there was a plague of Tzvardeya, which it was. And there are some commentaries which say Tzvardeya referred to as the small croaking creature, and so it appears in the words of Rabbi in the Medrash. So the frog is a small, weak creature. It's croaks, it makes noise, but it's really more of a nuisance than anything else. Now, what is the reason? What is the origin of the word Tzvardeya? Where does it come from? So look on, just skipping a paragraph, two paragraphs from the end of the page. What's the etymology of the word Tzvardeya? Does that give any indication either way? This is what Slifkin is trying to understand.
Where are we now?
I'm on bottom of 252.
Safar, to chirp.
Right. So some claim it comes from an unknown foreign source. It may be a combination of tsafar, which means to chirp, as frogs do, and the Arabic root of radat, tzvarde'a, which is a muddy marsh, which is the frog's favorite habitat. By the way, the term tsafar, which does make chirp, and chirp is very similar. A tzipor, for those who didn't catch the connection, tzvarde'a and tzipor, they both have the same root. A bird is called a tzipor because it chirps. What's the word for bird that doesn't relate to chirping? Oaf. Oaf, yofef, it flies. It's a flyer. Tzipor refers to the fact that birds chirp. Right. And Tzvardeya, therefore, is a chirping kind of animal. It's the same etymology. So they both may be foreign by origin.
So the crocodile chirps?
No, but the frog chirps.
Okay, but we're saying it's not.
No, he's actually bringing he's bringing both opinions together. He says, well, some say it's one, some say it's the frog. The frog is not going to grab people; it's a nuisance. And let's try to understand what the word Tzvardeya actually means. So Slifkin is saying, before I try to accept which commentary makes more sense, let me try to scientifically look back at the word itself.
Right.
If we can understand what the word means, then we can understand what kind of animal it's referring to. Most animals have some kind of relationship, or genus, or species, to what the animal actually is. Okay. For example, a wild animal is called a chaya because it's a being.
That's right.
Okay. I don't know how far I can go through this analogy, but anyways, so this is the tzafar which frogs do in the Arabic word of radah, which is the muddy marsh. The linguist Genesius indicates that the term denotes leaping in the marsh, as the term tzfir izim, which is some kind of billy goat that was also in a different kind of language. Others declare that Tzvardeya is a combination of two words, tzipor de'ah, like a bird of knowledge. We'll see what that means in a moment. Some take this to refer to the frog, which chirps like a bird and knows when to stop. And therefore, this Tzvardeya, this top of 253, there's a creeping creature that emits cries all night until morning, and it's tzipor da, the knowing bird, so to speak. This Tzvardeya knows because it knows the time of morning to cease from its cries. This is a medieval sefer, Chatzi Menashe. Then he says there's another interpretation which he found, which is very difficult, but he's going to give it to you. The third interpretation, this is really one that is like walking off the plank with right into the sea. It's very strange, because what did Genesius said? Genesius, who is the the Greek linguist, says the word Svardeya comes from this word tzipor, or tzipor deya. What kind of bird of knowledge could they be? So, but Svardiim, and he's quoting here from Medrash Lekach Tov and a Yalkut Shimoni. What is this word Svardeya? This was a bird, a tzipor in the Nile, that had deya, that had intelligence. And when this bird called to them, they came, and they were so named after this bird with intelligence, that somehow when the bird chirped and called, all the animals came, including the crocodiles. So this is some kind of suggestion the Medrash makes, trying to make sense of how the crocodile could be called a tzipor Svardeya. It wasn't the crocodile. The crocodile is only alluded to here indirectly because the bird is calling this to come. The problem is we don't have any birds that call animals. There's no Pied Piper in the bird kingdom that calls neither crocodiles nor frogs. So what's going on here?
The rooster.
The rooster doesn't call animals. The rooster is calling itself. The rooster is calling the chickens. The rooster is just referring. That's just the instinct. So he refers to an interesting reference by Herodotus, who is a Greek historian, a very early Greek historian, who visits Greek in 459 BC. I'm just skipping a couple of lines. And he refers to a small bird that's picking food from the teeth of a gaping crocodile. It has been suggested this refers to the Egyptian plover, or plover, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, which has since also earned the name crocodile plover. It's said that while the crocodile rests with his mouth open, these intelligent birds peck at the crocodile's teeth in search of the parasites. This crocodile makes no attempt to eat the bird and is apparently aware of its benefits. The bird is cautious and gives a call when fleeing to danger, thus also warning the crocodile. If the bird sees something coming, it calls. That's the tzipor deya. The crocodile skedoodles and slips back under the water.
Yeah, we see this a lot with other.
Right, you see this with a lot, but you don't see this with crocodiles. That's the problem. So
Why?
Slifkin says that he actually began to do his research. Okay, and he says in the next paragraph, this is a great explanation. This would once again say that what's going on here. What kind of animal is the Svardeya? The crocodile. Okay, well, specifically the bird that is in the crocodile comes out with the crocodile when the crocodile comes out of the Nile. It's kind of like a bit of a schlep. But the bigger problem is it doesn't really exist. And if you look at that, there is a bird who specifically makes its living by eating the parasites between the teeth of the crocodile.
Yeah, there is.
Not on crocodiles, he says. Other animals.
It's extinct.
He said it never existed.
Never existed.
Read it here. But the problem with this explanation is that the phenomenon described may not actually be true. Whether such a mutual relationship exists is hard to determine. In the zoological literature, few apart from Herodotus are actually recorded as having seen this. One ornithologist, is a bird scientist, said, "No reliable observer has ever seen the bird acting as a crocodile's toothpick. The myth has been perpetuated in literature and needs to finally be laid to rest unless contrary proof can be found." On the other hand, he went and found this crocodile hunter, Ofer Kobe, in Israel, who spent decades hunting and farming crocodiles in Africa. He informed me that he did observe it. So some people say it does happen, some people it doesn't happen, but if it does exist, it's really not that common, it's very rare. So it may be only be opportunistic, it may not be simply what it is. So in other words, he's really got three interpretations what this is. It's either crocodile, or the bird that's in the crocodile, which means the crocodile, or the frogs. In conclusion, he says, so I want you to have the conclusion, so you'll be able to have your Seder this year with your little frogs on the table, the little plastic frogs. In conclusion, while there are those who have taken the Tzvardeya of Egypt that refers to crocodile, its usage is midrashic in midrashic sources, and the etymology indicates that the frog is more likely contender, as several of the commentators suggest. Some suggest the term Tzvardeya refers to amphibious reptiles in general, and could therefore include both frogs and crocodiles. Maybe Tzvardeya is something that refers to a lot of things that come out of the Nile. So it could be there was big Tzvardeya, little Tzvardeya. It could be frogs and crocodiles. And that's what Netziv says. So there's a fourth possibility that it's not A or B, it's A and B. That Netziv says most of Egypt was plagued only by frogs, but Pharaoh and his palace and his entourage were attacked by crocodiles itself. Okay? So it could be both, right? But the frogs are still there. However, there are factors mitigating against the Tzvardeya being seen as a crocodile. The Torah says that Tzvardeya was quite troublesome to the Egyptian, but never posed a threat to their lives. The earlier plagues are nuisances. Crocodiles could never be able to enter your ovens and kneading bowls. And according to Genesius, the term Tzvardeya denotes leaping in the marsh, which is definitely not a crocodile. It's going to be a frog.
So where are we?
So Slivskin's conclusion is it is a frog, and what we understand Friday to be a frog is true, but there are definitely medieval commentators on the Tanakh who feel that this is the crocodile, and from the point of view of being something that would stand out in the memory of Egyptians, you're more likely to remember crocodiles all over the place than you would remember frogs simply jumping around being a nuisance for a few days.
Okay, so God willing, this Seder, this coming Passover,
You're going to bring a crocodile.
Am I looking
today.
at a crocodile or a frog?
So Slivkin says you're better off with a crocodile.
Really?
You're better off with a frog. I'm sorry,
Okay,
better off with a
it's a
frog.
frog.
Right. These are the birds that are in between it, right?
Moshe,
Yeah.
but I'm troubled by something.
Yeah. But it might be. Yeah.
Moses did not pray for the Sephardi to be wiped out, only that they should not harm Pharaoh.
Right. It's
Hold
true.
on here.
Sephardim, not Sephardim. Okay.
No, but that's not the point. Let me ask you something. He prayed.
If he prayed, they go back into denial.
Why does he have to pray not to harm Pharaoh?
Because they're all over the place. Because Pharaoh comes and says, get rid of these Sephardim. They're all over me. They're in my palace. They're bothering me. They're a nuisance.
Why shouldn't they harm him?
Because if Pharaoh says, get rid of them. Pharaoh comes to Moshe and said, okay, I learned my lesson. Can you get rid of them? Moshe says, I'll get rid of them tomorrow.
And why does he have to pray for Pharaoh? Why isn't that God's realm?
So Moshe prays to God to remove the Sephardim. That's what it means. Pharaoh comes to Moshe and says, okay, I got the message. Pray for me. Stop the Tzvardim. And Moshe says, when should I do it? And Pharaoh says, tomorrow. Moshe the next day goes to Hashem and says, he leaves the palace. He goes outside Egypt. He doesn't want to do where all the Avodah Zarah is. He says to God, get rid of the Tzvardim. And the Tzvardim will jump out and they jump back into the Nile.
Why does he have to pray to Hashem? He's got a job to do, Moshe. Moshe's doing his job.
Why
pray?
Because Pharaoh has to come to a decision on his own to let the Jewish people go. Moshe prays, the Sephardim leave, and then Pharaoh says, okay, forget about it. No deal. Deal's off. And this goes on again and again and again for the 10 plagues. Okay. All right. So, all in favor of frogs, put your hand up. Okay. All in favor of crocodiles.
I don't know.
But
I've got to think about that.
But you got to think about it. But here's what you got to think about: no one ever talks about bringing crocodiles to the Seder. Right? No one ever puts their leather belts on the table and says, "Here, guys, look at this. This is a crocodile belt, or something, or a crocodile pocketbook, or whatever it is." But it seems that Tzvardeya has been accepted as being the frogs. And if you, once again, in my mind, when you work with the easier to more difficult plagues, it looks like it was something more of a nuisance. But I just thought it was fascinating, because when I read this Ramban the first time, preparing for this class, I denied it, never heard this. You think you're surprised? I was more surprised. And I began speaking to people. I said, what can you tell me about this? What's going on here? And they said, here's the article. So I was shown the article by someone who's very close to me to say, here you can really see all the different opinions. So you've seen it's crocodile or frog, or possibly the bird and the crocodile, or possibly both, right? Or possibly some frogs for everybody and crocodile for Pharaoh. So far, so good. Okay. I'll tell you what I want to do. I'm sorry? No, actually, I've got 5 minutes before break. I want to do a short Ramban, take a break, and then we'll do Nesiv Shalom, okay? Yeah. So I want to talk about the next plague, which is the plague of darkness. And you don't need to go back into the Chumash to know about this plague of darkness. Just simply look at the Ramban on verse number 23. Okay, what do we know about this plague of darkness? What do you know about the plague of darkness in Egypt? Whoops, careful. Why don't let's start from another end. Can you define darkness for me? What is darkness?
Absence of light.
Darkness is absence of light. When we study physics, darkness does not really have a physicality to it. It's simply the absence of any light. You walk out at night, and you're in the country, and there's no light, there's no stars, a cloudy night, no moon. It's black, what we call pitch black. It's pitch black because there's nothing to illuminate. All right?
Except in Bereshit.
Except in Breshit, except here.
Darkness was something.
Right, and also the closest that you have, this darkness here, however, is something that is physical. And the closest probably that we have to that is what is called in astronomy a dark hole, a black hole. Which a black hole is I'm not sure how to explain it fully, but the matter is so dense that it seems to absorb even light. Light, which is not physical, light is a wave, that you can't touch light. It's simply a source of energy, but light is absorbed into this black hole, and there are black holes in space, that it becomes black. That black is a very dense kind of black. It swallows planets. It's a very heavy kind of gravitational pull. So anything is pulled into it. That's maybe the closest to what this is. Mm-hmm. So this plague of darkness that was given to the Egyptians is similar to a darkness that has a certain degree of physicalness to it. Denseness to it, because the Bible says that lo kamu ish mitachtav lo ra'u ish et achiv shloshet yamim lo kamu ish mitachtav shloshet yamim. They couldn't see each other and they couldn't get up for 3 days. The fact that they couldn't get up means it wasn't simply a blackout. There's something pushed down upon them that they were not able to move. Okay, and what does that mean? So I give you the example about the black hole. Now, the black hole was not known in the medieval world. Right? It's only a modern phenomenon that comes up, and we don't have black holes here.
And it's in space too.
And it's in space. It's not on Earth. But the closest that probably you can come up to this is where you have a very thick fog, and you can't see in front of you.
Right.
Okay, the Ramban is going to refer to that. The Ramban is actually going to refer to there were mythical mountains of darkness that is found in many kind of ancient sources, not only Jewish sources. People believed that on the other side of these mountains of darkness there were other things that they could find, and no one ever came back from them because they couldn't get out because they were dark. It's possible these were mountains that were very high, that were always clouded and shrouded in clouds. My daughter used to live in Neve Daniel. Neve Daniel is the highest place in the Gush. It's the highest location. In the wintertime, I used to be terrified to go there in the wintertime because you'd be in a cloud. The clouds and the fog would just envelop the city. You could walk, you couldn't see in front of you. In other words, I would drive out there, we'd drive out from Jerusalem, and you needed fog lights, and the fog lights wouldn't help. And you get to the top of Neve Daniel, you could see the cloud go by. And when the cloud was there, you could see it this far, and you couldn't get ahead. Now it happened to me there were street lamps in Neve Daniel, and you have headlights on your cars, but otherwise your candle would do no good. So it possibly that you could see this as simply a very thick kind of fog that absorbs any outside light and doesn't let any light go through, that was pushing down upon the Egyptians. An oppressive kind of fog, like a London fog, right? There was a fog in London in the 1950s. In the 1950s, which was actually a combination of smog and pollutants and sulfuric acid from all the coal plants.
I remember it.
Okay, you remember it? Yeah, you would. I just read about it. And people got 4,000 people died because people with respiratory distress couldn't breathe because the sulfuric acid, the sulfur from the plants, went into a gaseous state, and people were breathing this in.
So that's a natural disaster.
That's a natural disaster.
It's supernatural.
Correct.
So where's the supernatural?
So supernatural, as Moses said, is going to happen, and it happened. That's the supernatural. Supernatural, there weren't coal plants in Egypt. The natural phenomena happened because man tinkered with nature. Because everything was running on coal. And the Industrial Revolution brought all these coal factories and coal plants, and all the coals being burnt and all the pollution is going out there. But what happens here, there is no such thing in the days of Pharaoh. Plus, every miracle or every plague that happens does have some naturalness to it. It's just a tweak in nature. Whether these were frogs or crocodiles, they weren't aliens. They were natural types of animals. They just went a little amok. So same thing here. This is a fog, where there's a darkness. That the darkness itself has a certain thickness to it. So let's take a quick look at this Ramban, and then we'll take our break, and then we'll do the Nesiva Shalom. Pasuk Chaf Gimel. So it says in giving over the story about the darkness, V'tam lo ra'u ish et achiv lo kamu ish mitachtav, and the reason it says people couldn't see each other, they couldn't get up, Ki lo haya choshech hazeh afisat or ha'shemesh sheba misham v'yekmo layla. It wasn't like simply the lack of light, the lack of sun that happens what we call nights. So choshech, the plague of darkness, is not the plague of night. It's not nighttime. Avalaya choshech afila was a deep, deep, thick darkness. Kamo aid of. Aid is a mist. It's a fog. It's a very thick, misty fog. Niod sheyarad min Hashem came down from the heaven. Kalkein Amar, and that's why God says to Moshe, put your hand al Shemayim. Lo read misham chashecha gedol nafelet alehem. They'll bring down this darkness, this thick darkness. 10:23. Do you guys have it? You have the page?
Yeah.
What page is it? Tell them. Shin Chav.
Shin Chav.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
So the darkness comes down, and this darkness even put out all candles. Kasher b'chol achafirot hamukot v'chol mekomot hachoshech hatzum leit kayem or aner. In the same way that in many deep pits, in deep dark pits, and many places of darkness, there was this. You are not able to keep a light burning. What is this actually referring to? So in the mines, everybody know the term the canary in the mine. What is it called?
Mine.
Why did they bring canaries in? It's the first sign of lack of oxygen. And the two dangers of the miners in the mines one was methane, which would explode, and the other was carbon monoxide, which was called damp. They called it actually damp, which didn't explode, but it would die, and it was a silent killer. So the canary was a very sensitive bird. And it was one of the most sensitive, very difficult to kind of raise canaries for that reason, because they're so sensitive. So they'd bring the canary and put it towards the top, or put it in the mine. When the canary would stop singing, that was a sign that the oxygen level was going down. The miners knew to get out quick. This is before they invented safety lamps. The safety lamps was a lamp that they had. When the lamp would begin to flicker, they knew there was trouble. That's a later stage. But the canary in the mine was the early warning sign. But there are places where there's this carbon monoxide. Even today, carbon monoxide is a killer, and carbon monoxide actually drops down. Carbon monoxide is heavier than air. So there was more danger in carbon monoxide on the bottom of a room than on the top of the room. So there's more danger of carbon monoxide poisoning in your basement than there is on your second floor. It can happen anywhere, but it can happen in the basement, especially because your furnace is in the basement and carbon monoxide sinks down. So he's saying that, this darkness was so thick, it was like some kind of damp, some kind of thick fog that had also inherently built into it an ability for light to work. And that's why they couldn't use candles. And he says the same thing, people who travel over these mythical mountains. There were all kinds of stories of people who went over the mountains of darkness. They couldn't use lights, they couldn't use candles. There were these stories of people who went over, tried to explore and got lost and never came back, or they came back and they didn't know where they were, and they couldn't use lights. So whatever it was, the air was so thick and the oxygen level was so low that they were overcome and they couldn't, and the candles wouldn't burn. Because why? Otherwise they'd use candles. And that's what the Torah means, and that's what the Tanakh means in Tehillim Kufhei, which actually mentions some of the plagues in Psalm 105. It says, Shalach choshech vayechshach. God sent darkness and it became dark. Ki haya shiluach choshech. It wasn't simply the removal of light, but it was simply dark. It was simply God sent a physical darkness. And the Ramban tries to explain it basically in things that he can relate to. It was like a very thick fog that you could feel, like you can feel fog. It had a reality and a physicality to it. As the rabbis tell us, that you could touch this darkness. And he says, I'll tell you examples, kasher hu biyam okianis, kedud Rabbi Avram. Like the Ibn Ezra, normally he throws, he doesn't like the Ibn Ezra. He says the Ibn Ezra refers to people who were on boats, on ships, out in the ocean. Not sure if it means Mediterranean, may actually be beyond that in the Atlantic, or parts of the Atlantic, where they found it was completely dark. And he doesn't bring the full quote from the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra writes as follows: V'hinei b'yam okianos yavo choshech av shlo yuchal adam lafrish ben yom v'layla. There's this dark fog that comes in the middle of the ocean. You can't tell day from night. It stays for days. V'yamod, you don't have this in front of you. I'm just reading to you his quote. V'yamod lefamim chamisha yamim. It can be sometimes 5 days of this dark fog on the ocean, and the people on the ocean, the people on the boat, don't know where to go. And I, writes the Ibn Ezra, I was many times in this kind of situation. You can't travel, you just stay one place because you don't know which way to go, because they couldn't use the astrolabe to determine where the planets were. You saw nothing. You didn't know it was day, you didn't know it was night. This could go on for a week, for 5 days, and it's reality. He says that's what the Choshech was. So there was a reality that they could relate to, but that this occurred in Mitzrayim, not over the ocean, but rather was over land, was unusual. The fact that it happened because God predicted it was unusual. The fact that the Egyptians could not move was unusual. That was how thick it was, and the fact that they could feel was unusual.
Yeah, I'm surprised they call the thing darkness, or the plague called darkness.
Why would they call it?
Fog.
Aid. But it was so thick that it was dark. Because normally fog in the
I mean,
daytime.
the result of the fog is
what,
darkness.
what we're actually used to is many times fog burns off in the daytime.
Yeah,
Right? It gets cool at night, the fog comes, the sun comes up, it burns off the fog, or at least lightens it up somewhat. The most dangerous time for fog is driving at night. Okay, anyways, let's take our 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and do the Nesiva Shalom. I got a really good
I've
one.
been in this situation in Morocco, in the water. We're fishing, and the fog comes in, you can't even see the land anymore.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do. It's scary.
Bermuda Triangle.
Lost ships.
You could be rowing the wrong way.
If you read the accounts,
Is it fog? Sure, take it. If you want the sheet, keep the sheet. It's a great article. 5-minute break, and then we'll do the Nesiva Shalom piece. And if we have time, we'll do some halacha.
I think it was very scary driving up in the big one in the fog.
It was terribly scary. It was terribly scary. You can't imagine how scary it was. And it was constant.
That's in Karen in the middle of the night in the fog.
Okay, but this is the highest part. This is the highest part. This is the highest part of the gush.
Do they have
Lights on the road?
well, I meant more barriers on the side of the road.
Yeah, it's actually it's a fairly good single road highway. It's a 60. It's pretty good. Okay,
Moshe,
yeah.
Here's a question. Do we know the population of Egypt?
At this point,
Yes, ballpark. Is there anything from our sages to talk about anything with population? I'll tell you where I'm going with this. Would we say this?
yeah, there's plenty of copies. There's enough
Anglais.
copies.
Il n'y a pas.
If you want to
Okay.
take others, give them all.
Okay, so
More coffee.
here we go. Here's the. Before we start, I'm going to give you a test. What you learned on Tuesday. Okay.
Thank you.
Who was here on Tuesday from the beginning of the day when we started out? We all were. Okay, you missed it. So we did a Ramban at the beginning, and I told you it's one of the most fundamental Rambans, and that is the Ramban says the reason that we have all these mitzvot the reason that Yetziat Mitzrayim was so important was to show us the foundational role that God played in everything in the world. And sometimes when God when God says things, He controls nature. We can change nature and tweak nature and make things happen and change it back and change it forward. That was really the purpose of the whole story of the Exodus. And this is a lesson not only for Pharaoh, who's gone and will never be here again, right? Which is not just simply an historical event of what occurred. The message of what this is to tell me that God can change nature. He did change nature, and if I don't see the nature changing like the sea splitting in front of me, I know that there is a God who did it and can do it when He wants to do it, except He's not doing it for me now. And as well, every mitzvah that I do, or many of the mitzvot have an implication. I'm doing the Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. The Seder is a mitzvah for Zecher for Yetziat Mitzrayim. I say it in the Kriya Shema, Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. I say it when I put my tefillin on. It has parsha to talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim. My mezuzah has Yetziat Mitzrayim. The Ramban said for a couple of zuzim I can buy a mezuzah and slap it on my door, and I'm remembering Egypt, remembering the Exodus. And not only that, but every mitzvah that I do, even the ones that really are so minor and small, are really by showing me that there is a God. And even the natural events that happen every day that I don't see anything else except nature, that's also reminding me that there is a God who ran the world and could change nature. That was basically the theme of the Ramban. Okay, so now we're going to deal with the purpose of Yetziat Mitzrayim from a Hasidic perspective, from the Nesiva Shalom's perspective. And this is just it's a good way to really do a comparison in your mind between what is a normal Shad experience of the Ramban to what Nesiva Shalom, who is coming in from a Hasidic perspective and learning things not necessarily historically, not necessarily giving meaning, but seeing a different kind of meaning in the actual events themselves. Am I making sense? Mm-hmm. So sometimes we do different pieces, one piece from Ramban, one piece from Nesiva Shalom. This is actually the same kind of theme. So that's, you can really just in your mind kind of put the two together. And if you don't remember what we did on Tuesday, it's okay. The Nesiva Shalom stands by itself. Okay. So this is the bottom of the first page. The page starts on Sadi. So this the Nesiva Shalom is talking about Yetziat Mitzrayim. What's the purpose of learning about Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim? Who really cares? That's important to know historically, but why is it such a big deal? So Zichron Yetziat Mitzrayim, writes the Nesiva Shalom, is the bottom of the page where it says the Aleph. Okay. Zichron Yetziat Mitzrayim, hu mitzvah d'oraita. It's a mitzvah min Torah to remember the Exodus from Egypt. Uchidaktiv, as it says in Dvarim chapter 16, Leman tizkor et yom tzedcha me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yimei chayecha. That you should remember the coming out of Egypt all the days of your life. And we actually read this in the Haggadah. You'll remember it because he quotes it. Yimei chayecha hayamim kol yimei chayecha halei. Layla. It's a machloket between the Chachamim in the Haggadah. According to the Medrash, the Talmud says Yemei Chayecha, the days of your life means the day. Kol Yemei Chayecha means even the night. To remember the Exodus even at night, which is, by the way, why we say the third paragraph of the Shema, we say at Maariv, because the third paragraph of the Shema talks about really tzitzis. Third paragraph of the Shema talks about tzitzis. The mitzvah of tzitzis is really a mitzvah for when you can see things in daytime. The reason that we say the third paragraph of the Shema at Maariv, which is nighttime, when tzitzis are not really the mitzvah to do, is because of the last pasuk of the Kriyat Shema, which is Ani Hashem Elokechem Asher Otzeisi Etzchem Me'eretz Mitzrayim. Ani Hashem Elokechem. That I am the God who took you out of Egypt. So you want to remember the Exodus in the day, remember the Exodus in the night, all the time. So we have a special mitzvah to recall and remember the Exodus took place. It's actually, you just remember it. Okay, God took us out of Egypt. I just did the mitzvah. I remember that God took us. It's much easier than kind of kosher and Shabbos and Yom Kippur. It's just like it's a remembering kind of mitzvah. And says the Nesiv Shalom, you got to understand really why is this such a big deal? Why is this such an important mitzvah? Why is this a mitzvah in Torah to remember Egypt? It is such a big deal mitzvah that I have to do it in the day and do it at night. Many mitzvahs I can only do in the daytime. I can't do certain mitzvahs. Many mitzvahs only do certain days of the week, certain days of the year. This is a mitzvah that's 24/7. It's daytime mitzvah, it's nighttime mitzvah. Wherever I am or whatever I'm doing, I got to remember about the Egypt I came out of Egypt. Okay, the Anyan, and the reason he says is, the Torah gives us the way of life. It's not simply a history book, it's a life lesson book. It's not simply remembrances, recording of what took place in the past. This is fundamentals. This is not just Hasidus, this is in general. We learn from the Torah, we learn mitzvot, we learn lessons from the stories themselves. And what's the lesson when we say the mitzvah of Zechirat of coming out of Egypt? That the Torah wrote so much about it. Yesh bazeh horat derech chaim liyudud. It is giving for us a life direction, a life lesson for the life of the Jew. Shekol, which is as follows, and here's where the Hasidus comes in here. Shekol mitziyuto, that all of our existence, netuna b'chomer, b'bechinat tumat Mitzrayim. Our whole life we are living in Mitzrayim. We're living in a world that's not perfect. We're living in a world that's filled with sin and deficiencies. We're living in a world that's oppressive to us. And the purpose of every day, of every moment of the Jew is to get out of Mitzrayim. We're getting out of Mitzrayim. We're always getting out of Mitzrayim. We never get out of it completely because we're only human and we slip back and we got to deal with all the weaknesses and deficiencies and evil and badness, and we're not perfect, and we say I'm going to change, I'm going to be a new person tomorrow, and tomorrow comes and guess what? Right?
The Jews in Israel today are living in Mitzrayim.
That's right.
The Jew is living in a spiritual Mitzrayim. A Jew is coming. The challenge of the Jew is to realize he lives in a world that's not perfect. Makom tsar, a place of difficulty. Mitzrayim comes in tsar, it's narrow. You're squeezed. You're not having a good time, and I got to make myself better. I got to make the world a better place. I got to make myself better. In other words, I never can sit back at the end of the day and say tomorrow's a vacation. I can't say tomorrow, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to take off, I'm not going to do Shabbos. I did Shabbos last week. I did 4 Shabbos in a row. Tomorrow I'm going to take off a Shabbos and come back next week. Right? I'm just going to sleep in. You can do that, but that's slipping back. In other words, every day there is a challenge to break out of the lowness of this world and to reach up to a spiritually high world. There's a spiritual value system. It's not talking about physical. So it's not important whether you're living in Egypt or whether you're living in Israel, living in Thornhill. It's all about what the challenge of a Jew is to constantly make yourself better on a spiritual level. So this is real super Hasidus. This is what Hasidus will see. And this is what the Torah means. To remember that you're coming out of the Exodus all the days of your life. Not to physically come out of the Exodus. Not to remember the Jews came out. We have to come out of Egypt. We have to come out of the lust of Egypt, where Egypt was considered one of the lowest lands on a spiritual basis. Tumat Mitzrayim, and from the impurities of Egypt. When Moshe speaks to God, Pharaoh says, we just gave the example, Pharaoh says, get rid of the frogs, and Moshe says, when? He says, tomorrow. Moshe leaves the city to speak to God. He does not speak to God in front of Pharaoh, because Pharaoh's palace is full of all the idols and the tumah and the impurities of what Egypt stood for. So Moshe has to go out and communicate with God in a place that is untainted. So physically, wherever we are is not as important as spiritually. We have this challenge, and therefore it means as follows. And here once again, this Chassidus coming in. Yemei chayecha yamim. When do you got to try to get out of Egypt in your life, out of the weaknesses, the dirt of Egypt, the dirt in your life? Yemei chayecha yamim. It's during the day. Bizmanim atovim bechinat yamim. Even on the good times, when you're having a good time, you think everything is great, you're living the lap of luxury. Still tzarich yudi lizkar shechol hashlichut avura yorad yolam hilaman yitzim ritzayim. For a Jew has to realize the whole purpose he sent you, the mission he's here for, is to get out of Egypt. It's to get out of the lowness. In other words, it's not just about physicality. I got to try to include spirituality, even if I'm on the top of the world. The kol yimei chayecha, you got to remember this in the day. Kol yimei chayecha at night, l'rabot haleilot, bizman achashuchim b'chayim, even on the dark days of your life, things are going all against you. That's what night is all about. Tzarich lizkor zot, you got to remember that you're trying to make yourself better. So even if the cards are stacked against you, you can't say, well, I got to first get out of the hole. Getting out of the hole is getting out of the hole spiritually too. Kizeh tafkido shel hayudi. This is the purpose of being a Jew. Ukamamar Moran, and I don't know who he's referring to here. I don't know what the abbreviation is. Zechuti Yogen Aleinu. Shashabat v'chol modim heim zech l'yitziat Mitzrayim. That Shabbos and all the holidays are also a way to remember coming out of Egypt. Shabbat, we know, is the seventh day. We mentioned many times in the Kiddush and in the Tefillot zech l'yitziat Mitzrayim. The holidays surely remind us of coming out of Egypt. They remind historically, but the reason we have these special days of zech l'yitziat Mitzrayim is not just the historical remembrance. Hainu laskil Yehudi shalav l'tzeit mi Mitzrayim, to remind us that we got to get out of Egypt, that we have to work ourselves. And he explains it in case you didn't really understand it. All the existence, the chomriyos is the physicality, the unformedness, the lowness, the raw material of this world that we live in. Shel Adam hu matzav shel tumat Mitzrayim is like the impurity of Egypt. The tafkido, and our whole purpose in life is lotzeit mi Mitzrayim, to come out of Egypt. V'zeh tachlit shel kol Shabbatot v'yimim tovim, and this is the purpose of all of our Shabboses, all our Shabbatot, and all our Yamim Tovim, is to find time when we can actually focus. Sometimes during the week we're too busy. We're just trying to get ahead of ourselves. We're just trying to do things to keep feel like a mouse going around in a circle and on a cage. But on Shabbat, when you have time to relax, and Yom Tov, it's time to kind of do an introspection about how we can move along. Okay, v'yaldad zehu gamhu leman tiskar kol yimei chayecha. So what's kol yimei chayecha? Bechina yitziat Mitzrayim ha'shayecha l'chol yom. Kol yimei chayecha is not just all the day, but every day. The Shiyudi is called b'chol yom yimei chayav shalav l'tzeit mitzrayim. That you got to remember to get out of Egypt. Sheyesh inyan yitziat Mitzrayim madrigot hagvahot b'shabbatot v'yamim tovim shemzech l'tziat Mitzrayim. There's an idea to get out of Egypt. Get out of the Egypt within you on the days that we're flying high, which is spiritually flying high, Shabbos and Yom Tov. V'yesh yitziat Mitzrayim b'chol yom, and even every day, b'chol ma sheyudi korei kriyat shema b'voka ba'erev shuzech l'tziat Mitzrayim. When you say kriyat shema, and in the kriyat shema, the last paragraph, it's not just the tzitzis. I told you the last paragraph is Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Yisrael. I'm not just remembering God. I'm remembering God put me here, that I got to get out of Egypt. And what's the best time to remember that? When I say kriyat shema. What am I saying when I say kriyat shema? I'm recognizing the unity of God. I'm recognizing the mitzvot He gave me. V'lerabos haleilos, and even at night, shegam be'esh cheshkol yim b'layla v'chashechut, kasher choshech la'yehudi nera v'nera shakol chashuch v'sagur alav. Even when everything looks like it's closed down against you, it's all black in front of you. Gam az mutal to love mitzvah, l'tzeit mi Mitzrayim. You still have the mitzvah to go out of Egypt, to get out of Egypt spiritually. V'gam b'pshuto inyan b'leilot, and this is also what it means at night. Shalayla huzmanit gabrut hachomer ala tzura. The night is sometimes, because you can't see things, it's a time when the unformed is more powerful than the formed. What he's trying to say here is there are two, that all material items are either chomer or tzura. Chomer is unformed raw material. Tzura is a shape. For example, if I take clay, I make it into a bowl. I take metal and I make it into a bridge. a sculpture. So Chomer is the unformed, and Tzura is the formed. Obviously, I'm bumping up the level of what the purpose is when I take the unformed to make it into a form. So nighttime is sometimes seen as the time where the unformed part of the world is in ascendancy, because you can't see things. Right? It's a deconstruction time, whereas the daytime is when the tzura, which is more adin, more refined, is in ascendancy. So even at night, when the chomer is in ascendancy over the tzura, and you have hitkabuta tavot and hitkabut, the taiva, the lusts, come into, play, because who will know? Even then, you have to try to remember to get out of the Egypt within you. And as it says, the servants of God who stand in the house of God at night, those who stand even at night to try to do their work to spiritually raise themselves are those who are really serving Hashem. Okay, that's the first piece. So far, so good? Okay. Now, then he's going to say something else. Okay. So there's one pasuk that says in Dvarim Perek Tzayin, "Leman tizkar yom seischal meretz Mitzrayim kol yimei chayecha." That's what he started with. You should remember all the days of your life, that the day that you came out of Egypt. So that is Dvarim chapter 16, and that's the pasuk you recognize from the Haggadah. There's another pasuk that comes up in Dvarim Perek Dalid, and that is. Is it here yet? Let me see. I'll wait until he introduces it. Okay. Let me just read the next paragraph here. So I think he introduces it. He hasn't introduced it yet. Okay, let's go on. He's actually going to introduce something else first. So the question really is, okay, so you know the problem. The challenge is that every day you got to try to get out of Egypt. Every day, wherever you are, you got to try to raise your level. Now that's easier said than done. So I'm gonna, what's the Harvey Booker saying? If you could have done it by yourself, you would have done it already, right? This is the diet doctor commercial. If you could have done it by yourself, you would have done it already. So how's the way to do it by yourself? How do you make it work? So therefore, says the Nesiv Hashem, I'm going to tell you the key to how you can begin to find the key to improving your spiritual level. It's not going to give you the whole book. The whole book is different for each of us, but there's one key point you have to have, and he's going to tell you right now. The question stands before every Jew. What's the way, the power to get out of Egypt? How do I get to know, do an introspection and take stock, what my level is, and how do I go ahead from that? How do I know where I am? How do I know how to move ahead? Even in the Exodus from Egypt, the Chazal, the rabbis tell, Shemar Kodesh Baruch Hu Moshe, God said to Moshe, if you don't take the people out, nobody's going to be able to take these people out of Egypt. Not everybody could get out of Egypt. It took a Moshe to get them out. So what's he saying? If you want to get out of your Egypt, you got to be like a Moshe. Who can be like a Moshe?
Nobody.
Except there's one part of Moshe you can be like. Okay, hold on. Only the power of something that's like Moshe can get the Jews out. How can you get out of your Egypt if you don't have the power of Moshe, being the wise, the Navi, and so forth? We said, I explained already in a different place. It's about one very special, unique aspect of Moshe. Moshe is identified not only as the Navi on the highest level, he's called also V'ish Moshe Anav Miod. He's the most humble person, which is Hanava v'Shaflut Ban Yached Mikol Adam. Moshe was unique and special about humility and about lowness. K'mod Kasuv V'ish Moshe Anav Miod Mikol Adam Moshe Pnei Hadamah. Now, it's very easy to say I want to be humble. What does that really mean? And what am I trying to be humble to? Humble to you? What am I saying? Okay, I'm a nobody and you're greater than me? Humble to Hashem. V'zohi igdu lo shem Moshe Rabbeinu. K'moshe Torah merit alav, u'madua lo yireitem l'daber be'avdi Moshe. The God says to Miriam and Aaron, why weren't you careful to speak about my servant Moshe? And Ramar Chazal, Moshe afapi she'eno avdi, v'avdi afapi she'eno Moshe. In other words, Moshe, who is my servant. Moshe, because he was Moshe, because he was humble, and because he was my servant. In other words, v'zeh hakoch, which is the power, therefore, to be humility, not humility to other people, humility to God. To recognize that I to God am a nobody. In other words, me in comparison to what the Almighty sets in place for me, I can't hold a candle to God. Right? I can be a big shot to you, but when I look at my relationship to the Almighty, I realize that I am anav, I am shafel, I am finite. God is infinite. This was the ability that Moshe brought to take the Jewish people out. His humility. Because Moshe could reduce his existence to be nothing in comparison to the Almighty. And if you think about it for a moment, this is not just Hasidus going on, this is what Moshe actually did. Moshe is only the successful leader because he's only as good as God. Everything that Moshe does is not about Moshe. Nothing that Moshe does is about Moshe. Everything that Moshe does, he's doing as a shaliach, an emissary, an extension of the Almighty. Moshe comes to Pharaoh and says, let the Jewish people go. Why? Because God says, go to Pharaoh. Moshe splits the sea because God says, put your hand up and split the sea. Moshe says, here's the Torah because God said, give the people the Torah. So Moshe kind of reduces his own personal existence. Right? And Moshe becomes the man of God, and Moshe is always the man of God, and Moshe is always in communication with God, because Moshe has removed his own personal self-thought, his own personal lifestyle, his own personal life. That doesn't mean you've got to give up your life to be a Moses or to get out of your Mitzrayim, but you have to recognize that where I'm going is a road that I'm not paving. The road has been paved for me.
Where's his free will with this?
Your free will is whether you want to do this.
Moshe was on such a level, does he kill his free will?
He had to deal with this. The stronger that you are going to work on something, the stronger your will is going to try to want to break away.
So he still had his free will?
Mm-hmm. I believe so.
Okay.
But you don't, in fact, you do find that he uses free will. God says speak to the rock, and what does he do? He hits the rock.
That's right.
That's wrong.
So
there are consequences.
Okay.
God says to Moses, I'm going to destroy the Jewish people because they're worshiping the golden calf. And Moses says, don't. What will the nation say? So Moshe kind of pushes back at the Almighty. So it doesn't mean that you lose your free will by following, but there's a recognition Moshe has, and that's why he's able to communicate panim al panim, face to face, that even though he is on that level, God is of course, light years on top of him. And that's why you can receive the communication. Now you can't become a Moses that you're going to be a Navi on that level. That's not what it means. It means symbolically to talk about your own personal exodus, your own personal improvement, your own personal growth level on spirituality. This is the same way that you have the way Moshe was mevatel, was nullified his personal wants to the wants of the Almighty and did everything what God said. So too I'm going to say, well, the way that I become great is God has already given me the book. God has already shown me if I want to make my world better, if I want to make myself better, here is what's found in the Torah.
So Moshe killed his physical and material free will.
He eliminated it, I guess, until he felt there were issues that he needed to bring to the forefront.
I think he eliminated it. I think he just said,
he made a decision.
This is more important than this.
Right.
Well, when you make a decision to follow Shabbos, there's an elimination of a free will, is there not?
But every
not
time
to push a button to walk across the street.
No, that you're actually making a free will every time you come to the button. You made that decision, but every time that you come to the button, you're going to make that decision again.
No, and it's ingrained in you to follow it week after week.
Correct.
It's been done.
Right. So the answer is that is correct. Everybody's point of free will is moving. When I spoke at Aish, that's what I talked about. Everybody's free will decision is where the actual battlefield is. In other words, my free will is different than a person who never kept Shabbat's free will. Because for me to keep Shabbat is less of a choice every Shabbat, because I do it. The person who never kept Shabbat, when they decide to do it, that's their choice. I have other challenges in my life. We all have our own challenges. But the challenge of free will, actually the real challenge of free will, is a constantly moving kind of battlefield. In the same way, Jeff heard me once speak at Aish Torah, I pointed out that when you have two armies, the actual battlefield keeps moving. But the battlefield of change, where this piece of property can go to side A or side B, at that point is right here. Tomorrow it may be over here. When Army A has moved over here, the previous battlefield is no longer a battlefield. It's no longer a challenge. It's already been conquered. So that's the same thing. It's Rav Dessler. It's a lot of people. Some of it's Rav Dessler, some of yes. So, but other people write about the same thing as well. So therefore, the challenges I have are the challenges that are very unique to me. I gave the example then. I'll give it now, and I don't want to go too far into it. That a Cossack has a change, has an opportunity to change. Right? He has the Cossack. This is the paradigm of evil. A Cossack goes into a village. He rapes, kills, and pillages. Okay, when he gets to the next village, if he doesn't kill and only rapes and pillages, he's actually made a free will decision to move up one notch. If he comes to the next village and he only pillages and he doesn't rape or kill, he's moved up another notch. But in other words, a Cossack can't become a tzaddik, right, overnight. But at the same time, every time he makes a little bit of a change, and no one's going to say that the Cossack is a great guy if he rapes and pillages and doesn't murder. But for that Cossack, he's made a free will choice. So that's the battlefield for the Cossack. So the same thing, the battlefield is changing. You see, right, every person has choices. For Moshe Rabbeinu, his free will may not have been keeping about Shabbat. His free will may not have been listening to the Almighty. There may have been things that came up, such as talking to the rock instead of hitting the rock. But it's not that free will was simply eliminated. It's always there. It just plays out differently every time along. And our challenge is to kind of keep raising our level. Keep raising ourselves to a greater, higher, more refined level. Okay, so back in Moshe. So once again, so the symbol of Moshe is that Moshe was mevatel, nullified himself to the Almighty. So therefore, yesh gula kasher ruyim legula, sheyesh beyadam mitzvot u'zchuyot rabot. So we can redeem ourselves. This is the internal redemption, the internal improvement. If we have many mitzvot and many zchuyot, many good things, akasher yisrael mishukaim b'memtat shari tumah v'im beyadam zchuyot u'maasim tovim. But if we're sunk into the 49 levels of tumah, of impurity, and we don't have mitzvot, ein heim nigolim el bekach midato shemosheshi b'tilat gmura shel Hashem yitbarach. It's that we can nullify ourselves to God. So even if I didn't do everything right, even though I still got a way to go, I'm still in that 49th low level of impurity, I can still break out ahead, because if I nullify myself to the recognition of God as the great that I follow, that I'm nothing compared to God. If you don't take them out, without your power, without your special unique trait of habatilut, to nullify yourself of humility, of abject humility, there's no way to get out. And this is what it says, that you get out of Egypt every day. That you've got to remember Moshe took us out. Even the lowest level that we're in, who is Negal, you get out by simply nullifying who you actually are. And the same way it says, a similar kind of thing says in the Sivah Shalom, and he quotes it from the Baal Shem Tov in the next paragraph. In the Pasuk it says, this is the end of Parshat Shoftim. It says you're going to go to battle on your enemy, and you're going to find sus v'rechav. There are horses, and there are chariots, and cavalry that are larger than you. Lo tiramehem, don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid, because God is with you, took you out of Egypt. So what does that mean? In other words, the pasuk says in Dvarim Perikaf, you're going to fight your enemy, and you're outnumbered, but don't worry, God is with you. Okay, I understand that. But God who took me out of Egypt, I know God took me out of Egypt. Why is that going to help me more than simply knowing about God? So he says, what's the enemy we're talking about here? Once again, this is the Hasidus approach to what the pasuk is talking about. It's not talking about physical fight. It means that on Pshat, but in the level of Kabbalah and Hasidus, it means about an internal fight. What's your enemy? You see the Yetzer Hara fighting against you. There's going to be a great enemy, great people against you. The Yetzer Hara's got greater strength than you. The great Yetzer Hara will outwit you any day. So don't be afraid of them. God is with you, who took you out of Egypt. The same way that God took the Jewish people out of Egypt when they were the Jewish people were also sunk down and they couldn't get out by themselves. God as if made like a channel, a tunnel under his kisei hakavod to get get them out around that, like it says with Masheh, God makes a tunnel, an emergency tunnel, to get us out when we're sunk in. How do you do that? By nullifying yourself. Even if you don't find a way that God can save you, nonetheless, the way of Yetziat Mitzrayim, God showed the way to go out for all generations. So this is really what he's writing again and again and again, even if you're low and low and low, that you've got to constantly work for this to get out. And in the next paragraph he says, I'm going to skip down to about the 6th line, that every day everybody's got a power to get out of Egypt every day. This is the paragraph follows. V'nechlal b'zeh b'mamar maran hasaba kadishim islanam zuchud yadgein aleno sheyom sheyudi eno oseh pula hepach v'tzono l'shbar koach hara eno nechshav liyom ha'chaim. So the original Slonimer Rebbe said that if you don't find one day that you're fighting against the Yetzer Hara, you're not alive. Every day this is the battle. Hainu shebachol yom v'yom noten HaKadosh Baruch Hu yodi koach sheyitziat Mitzrayim v'yalav l'tzeit mechelek nosav shel Mitzrayim hu koach hara nemtzabo. You can find every day to fight and go out against Mitzrayim. Every day is a battle. That sounds depressing that you never win the battle. The answer is you are winning the battle, but the battlefield keeps moving. The war is always ongoing. You just keep moving the battlefield along. So, and this is what it means. Moshe took us out, and so forth and so on. That's the power of coming out of Mitzrayim.
What does it say when it says that Moshe took us out of the land of Egypt?
Yeah. What does that mean?
As opposed to Hashem took us out of the land of Egypt.
Hashem took us out through Moshe. Moshe actually physically led us through the word of Hashem. Okay, that's what it means.
But
we needed Moses to take us out. God didn't simply just say, God didn't appear to everybody and say, pack your bags. We could not have gotten out had there not been a leader to coalesce us, to bring us together. That was Moshe.
I mean, God could have done it without
he could have done it without Moshe.
He could have done it.
Or he could have been somebody else.
Right, but
then we wouldn't have learned this lesson.
You wouldn't have learned this lesson, and also...
No, I understand. But why does it say that Moshe took us out of the land of Egypt? It makes it sound like
he did.
If it wasn't for him, it wouldn't be...
Why is it called Chamisha? Why is it called the 5 books of Moses? Why is it called the 5 books of God?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's the same question. The answer is Moshe is the protagonist. Moshe is the leader. Moshe puts it together. Moshe is the intermediary. Okay.
We were also weak-minded.
Right. Also, Moshe was the only person who actually lived in freedom.
Yes.
From a practical point of view, to have the vision to take the people out, you needed someone who understood what it meant not to be a slave.
Exactly. So when we talk about Moshe being humble, I just don't understand that either. How can he be a leader and be humble?
So the answer is because his leadership...
Because he's got to be a leader. He's got to make choices. So he's got to say no sometimes.
So the answer is, it's an excellent question. The answer is the fact that Moshe, without the support of Hashem, would not have been a leader. In fact, he probably was not a natural leader.
Right.
Because every time there's a problem, Hashem comes to save the day.
Yes.
Okay, every time there's a difficulty, it's Moshe who is only leading the Jewish people through God.
He only does
what
Hashem tells him.
If anything, he's an unnatural leader, except he's the unnatural leader who is willing to nullify his leading style to follow God, as opposed to someone who kind of shoots off the handle and does things what they want to do. If Moshe had been a leader who would have been capricious, or what we call destructive leadership. If Moshe had been a Donald Trump, who knows where we would have ended up.
Okay.
That's different leadership
style. He knew how to handle his greatness.
Yeah. He was able to control that and say, this is more important than what I'm thinking.
Right. Okay, I'm going to skip the end of this paragraph and move on to a little bit in bet. I'm going down to bet because there's one more point.
Where are you going?
The bottom of the page is bet. Bottom of Sadi Bays. On the right side, so this he goes again about Moshe. But there's one more point he says here, and I think it's an important key that we have to put in here. He says there's another pasuk, and that's what I was referring to before. We talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim. We said the pasuk was in Devarim Tadzayin. Yom Tzidcha. Remember the day you came out of Egypt, all the days of your life. There's another reference to something we have to remember. We don't often remember it as much, and that's in Devarim Perek Daled. That Moshe tells the Jewish people, it's actually not a mitzvah to say, but the Torah Moshe says to the people, Raki Shomer Lecha. This is right on Bet. I'm going to move to the third line. that after talking about Kol Yimei Chayecha, it says there's also Zchirat Maman Har Sinai. You remember what happened in Sinai, as Moshe says in Devarim chapter 4, Raki Shomer Lecha U'Shmor Nafshecha Mi'od Pen Tishkach Et HaDvarim Asher Ra'u Einecha U'Fen Yasur Mevavcha Kol Yimei Chayecha. It says in another place, the days of your life, be careful and remember not to forget what your eyes saw in Sinai. Don't ever forget the theophany that took place at Sinai. So the Nesiva Shalom says, you know what, it's not a mitzvah, special mitzvah to do so, like we have a mitzvah to remember, but it's something else the Torah identifies as something you're going to do the entire day of your life. So what's the difference between the two? Coming out of Egypt and going and remembering Sinai. And if coming out of Egypt is not just a historical recollection of coming out of Egypt, it's about a life lesson to keep in your mind. So what does it mean to remember Sinai? What do I remember? How does that help me? So he says as follows: there's positive identity and then there's negative identity. There's sur meira b'asei tov. There's staying away from evil and asei tov, doing good. And therefore Sinai versus Egypt are the flip side of the positive and the negative. What is coming out of Egypt? Don't slip back to the deficiencies of Egypt. Don't slip back to where you were. It's just not a negative identity. Don't be what you were. But rather you got to work towards something which is positive. What's the positiveness? Which is the keeping of the Torah. The keeping of the Torah has a whole lot of positive values. Remembering God, remembering Shabbat, doing this, helping your parents, supporting parents. There are negatives too. But the negatives are a positive kind of identity. So it's not simply about leaving Egypt. In other words, it's not simply about getting away from Egypt, about leaving the crud of this world, leaving the slough of this world, but it's also about going to something that's positive, that draws us up to it, that improves us, that makes us more refined. And that's what he says. The two of them talk about remembering Kol Yimei Chayecha. So you got to remember getting out of Egypt, but you also got to remember it's not just simply running away from something, you're running to something. Yesh Lafaresh. This is 3 lines from the bottom of the right column. Gemrumaz bazeh al pi ma shekasuv hayesod ha'avodah b'shem ha'ari shemiyom briat olam ein yom echad domeh lechavero. Every day is different. Uv'chol yom yesh taftidim chadashim v'tikanim chadashim sheyudi tzrich lataken be'oto yom. Every day there are different challenges and different things you can correct. No 2 days are the same. V'tafkira mechudash b'chol yom hu bebeis chalakim. And every day the challenges you have for every day that's different are both sur meira v'asei tov. Go away from evil and go to do good. Every day should be a new day in your eyes, both to leave where you were and also to move ahead positively to something that has a goal. Going out of Egypt is a sur meira, running away from the bad. Leaving the bad behind. Leaving the klipot, the averot, the weaknesses, the deficiencies, the crud of Mitzrayim behind. And Egypt going out of Egypt was not a one-time historical occurrence, like you talked about. It's eternal. Every day I'm trying to get away from the crud of this world. I'm trying to leave the lowliness, the materialism of this world behind. We've got to leave the tomb of this world behind. This world is really not a good spiritual place. I got to leave it behind and build my own world. Which world?
You're talking about Mitzrayim. If it wasn't for slavery...
Let me finish this, okay? Right? All the tests of our lives, all the travails, all the tribulations of our life are all that happen to us every day. That's what means so we got to get out of and every day there is a help, there is an awakening comes from on high. God comes to help us along to leave the bad behind us. Even God comes to help us. However, there's another part. We're not just running away. We're not just leaving the bad behind from us and going into nowhere and going to a vacuum. But we're going to Torah, which is the asei tov, to good, do good, which is sanctity and holiness and spirituality. And the story of leaving the Exodus and going to Sinai to receive the Torah is not just an historical event, But every day, shebachol yom yesh ludik b'chinat kabbalat Torah v'avodah shlasei tov. Every day you can re-accept the Torah again. Every day. Every day's Torah is a little different. I don't mean Torah is different, but the challenges of reaching that is different, and the emphasis is different. And that's why every day you shouldn't forget you at Chorev. And this is what it means. You renew every day the creation story. Because why does God make the world anew every day? Because the whole idea, who cares that the world existed all the way from creation? We can all be like a new being every day. We recreate ourselves. We're the creation story all over. We learned the other day about when you wake up, you be recreated. So we recreate creation every day, and we have the opportunity to leave the bad in this world and move beyond that to what can be actually good values in our lives. Etc., etc., etc. So therefore, every day we can build ourselves closer to the Torah, and so forth and so on. And this all happens and shows that the Mitzrayim stories that we got out of that, we're able to defeat that, all the different nisyonot against us. Okay? Question, yes.
Yeah, Rob.
Go ahead.
When we're talking about leaving Egypt,
Yes.
are we talking about leaving Egypt physically, or are we talking about leaving Egypt spiritually?
Both.
Well, only
Both.
because we also talk about
Both.
Joseph living in Egypt, and
Both.
he was able to keep his.
That's exactly.
And yet he lived in Egypt.
So once again, what you're hitting is the nail on the head. The key of Hasidus, the key of this Kabbalah and Hasidus is to try to say to us the story that we had was a historical event, right? It has all kinds of lessons. That's what the Ramban was trying to tell us. You remember the story because everything reminds us about God. So says the Slonian Rebbe that what Mitzrayim is all about, you coming out of your own Egypt. The whole story is written this way to you can take a personal lesson and apply it to yourself. So it's not only the actual historical event, there's a lesson behind it. When a person writes a play, it may not be a good example, when a person writes a novel, because the novel is fictitious, and this is reality, but a person writes a novel, not only they want you to remember who the characters were, they want you to understand the symbolism of the characters. If you ever go to take a literature course, they'll tell you that this novelist was this represented this and this represented that. Right? So this is all the same thing. Coming out of Egypt represents the battle we have to come out of our own weaknesses, our own impoverishedness, our own oppressive desires that we have to pull us down. When we kind of slip into the lust of this world, we're actually kind of slipping back into no values.
That's a physical lust.
Right.
It goes hand in hand with the spiritual.
So I'm trying to relate this also to the other book we're reading, that we have to move to Israel in order for Mashiach to come.
Yes.
So, do we really have to go to Israel for
So
Mashiach
what
to come
he-
if we get out of our own spiritual Egypt?
Well, there are two things. One is your personal struggle. The other is the struggle of the people to reach the time of Mashiach. Personal struggle you have is to improve yourself. Remember, we're not animals. We are animals, but we like to do more than animals.
So if Moshe Rabbeinu lived here in Canada, in Toronto,
Yeah, he would probably be Moshe Rabbeinu.
does he have to move to Israel?
He would probably be Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not Rabbeinu. Okay.
He lives in Thornell.
Okay. Does he have to go to Eretz Yisrael?
Yeah.
He never got to Eretz Yisrael.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Okay. So you have the greatest Jew who never got to Eretz Yisrael. So you can be great with it, but in terms of peoplehood, the people are on the mission to go to Israel. But we ourselves, we are not just animals. We're not just animals that stand up. We're not just animals that have a developed cerebrum. We're not just animals that have free choice. We're animals that want to improve ourselves and improve the world and make ourselves better.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're simply just we're just animals.
Along these lines, Moshe tells the people, tell your children and the children's children. In your opinion,
Yes.
secular Jewry, 98% plus, we have mezuzahs. Okay.
Yes.
Does that mean we remember? What do you think?
What they remember, they don't know what they remember.
But do you think that's part of remembering?
So I think sometimes people put a mezuzah because they think it's a good luck charm. I bought a house once and people lived there before. I bought a house once from people who were Pakistani many years ago, and they kept the mezuzahs up on the walls, and they painted the whole house, but they didn't paint the mezuzahs. They were actually very clever. They knew that. The mezuzahs actually were not, when I opened them, they were the old tiny paper mezuzahs. They weren't even kosher mezuzahs. But these people, because they had bought the house from Yids before them, so the Pakistanis didn't put them up. They had owned these people who lived before them. But they recognized that this was some kind of thing that was good for Jews. It'd probably be good for them too. Right. Now these people, the original people who put it up, I don't know who they were. Were they traditional, not traditional, semi-traditional? What was their adherence? I don't know. The Pakistanis were non-Jews, right? They were complete non-Jews, but they knew they didn't paint that. Then they had in one of the rooms, one of the kids had put like a 10 Commandments on the wall with like a decal. And they also didn't paint that. They painted around that. They wouldn't paint over the 10 Commandments. So they understood.
So they believed there was.
All I'm saying, so many people believe there's something there. They may not know what's actually in the mezuzah.
So, but have 85% of the Jewish people in the world
put up a mezuzah
where they come from?
I don't know.
So what we're saying. What do you think?
So we have
a
lot.
Have we forgotten?
So the answer is we have a challenge for ourselves. We have a challenge to kind of reach out and kind of help others who have forgotten.
Every time we're persecuted the Jewish people from the time of Egypt till today. Because we've forgotten the two temples.
I'm not going to go there. I don't know. But here's what I do know. In my own mission in life is I want to make myself a better person. Not because I'm afraid to get persecuted. This is not about I want to run away, but I want to do it because it makes sense. It makes me a better person.
But that's human behavior to always want to be better.
That's it is human behavior, but how to become better and how to improve yourself, the Torah gives us the lifestyle and gives us the choices.
For sure. But I'm just saying it's a natural thing to want to better yourself.
I mean, the whole key to this is, once again, is saying, we'll wrap up with this, the whole key to this is saying that basically, and this is what he really says in the last piece, that the mitzvah or the stories of the Torah are not just simply historical events. They're not even historical events to remember they're so important, but they're ways to give me a symbolism to put into my life. And the story, therefore, Zechel Yetziat Mitzrayim. And remember, Va'era and Bo are the Parshios of coming out of Egypt. The whole reason we spend so much time in the Torah and talking about this is to give me a lesson as well, that I'm a Pharaoh. But the fact that there were challenges of getting out of Egypt, everybody's got a challenge, their own personal challenge. Mitzrayim is not just a place historically, but in Hasidus and Kabbalah, Mitzrayim is also a spiritual place where I start from. And if I don't recognize, and then here, just one more point, if I don't recognize that I'm coming from Mitzrayim, then I can never make myself improved.
The 24,000 students that died under Akiva.
Yes.
So is there a connection there? Did they forget?
They may have forgotten personal relationships.
So it's connected.
Yeah, I guess so.
There's an interesting connection between the Ramban's approach to the Yetzias Mitzrayim and the Sivir Shalom. They actually work.
They come together,
well.
Right?
In fact, you can almost see the Ramban's approach as giving you the comfort that you could do.
Right, but they're coming from very different ends.
Yeah.
That's why I said this is, if you want a good example of how Hasidus and Kabbalah can look at things very differently and give you the lesson, and the Ramban is coming from a different perspective, give you a very similar lesson. That's the perfect example. So if the two of them kind of play off each other.
Very nice.
Okay, Shkoach. Okay, 382. Chapter 16 is about the Mun. And the people have come out of Egypt. They've crossed the sea. Pharaoh is gone. The Egyptians are gone, and they come to. They leave Elim and they come to Midbar Sin. There are different wildernesses in the Sinai Peninsula. I can try to show you on a map where these are, but maybe we'll keep that for the end. So they come to it. Let's begin in chapter 16. They leave Elim and they come to Midbar Sin, which is between Elim and between Sinai, which is Mount Sinai. On the 15th day of the month, the second month, let's say Sam Eretz Mitzrayim, and they begin complaining. Vayilonu kol adat meis v'ala Moshe v'ala Midbar. They begin complaining to Moshe in the Midbar. Vayamru alehem, and they say to Moshe, b'nei Yisrael, but they say to Moshe, Mi'itein motenu b'yad Hashem, b'yad Mitzrayim b'shiftei al siyar basar. We should have died. You should have left us, and would have had died by the way of Hashem in Mitzrayim when we had the flesh pots. We had lechem lasova. We had bread to satiation. He took us out to this wilderness. We're going to die by famine because there's no food to eat. So what are we going to eat here? So they packed everything, but they didn't pack enough food, and they're into the midbar. It's an arid climate. There's no trees. There's nothing growing really. How are they going to be producing anything that they can survive on? So God's response is, "Vayom Hashem Moshe." God says to Moshe, I'm going to bring down bread from the heaven. The people go out. They're going to go out every day to gather their stuff. In order that how they translate, so I can test them whether they will follow my teachings or not. What's the test that He's going to test them? What kind of test is this going to be? Bitachon, which is faith.
Yeah, the bread will come the next.
Okay, one interpretation would be the bread will come every day. Right? You can't stock it away. You can't stockpile it. Today you go to the supermarket, you buy enough, you buy for today, tomorrow, and the day after, or whatever or the whole week. There were no fridges, and more importantly, the bread would only come down and last only the day. That's actually a pshat the Ramban is going to give. And also, and I'll see if you follow my Torah or not. On the sixth day, which is Friday, you're going to prepare what you get. It's going to be twice as much as Mazal Tov ala Brit. Okay? So Al Asher Yoketu Yom Yom is going to be twice as much as you're going to collect every day. So did it come down twice as much, or did they collect twice as much? How would you read that? In other words, did twice as much mun come down on Friday, or they picked twice as much on Friday? And that's a discussion in Rashi. What does that mean? Does it mean they picked twice as much and it came out to be twice as? They picked the same amount, only came out to be twice as much, or they actually collected twice as much as they normally did every day? There was more mun coming down, and that's what's going to happen. So Moshe now speaks to Bnei Yisrael, and they tell him in verse number 6, okay, Erev vidatem ki Hashem hotzi etchem eretz Mitzrayim. In the evening you'll know that God took you out. U'boker riyitem et kvod Hashem. In the morning you're going to see the glory of Hashem. B'shemot lo netechem. You heard your complaints. Al Hashem v'nachnu al kitleinu. What are you complaining about us? And it goes on, we're not finished yet. And Moshe says, "B'teit Hashem lachem bo'erev et lechem basar lechol v'lechem b'boker l'sboa." God is going to give you meat at night to eat and bread in the morning to be satisfied. B'shmo Hashem etun azichem asher tamalinim alav. That God heard your complaints. V'nachnu lo lein tlotechem gal Hashem. They're not complaining about us; you're complaining about God. So suddenly, meat is thrown in here. Where did the meat come from? What did God say to Moshe before?
I'm going to bring you bread.
I'm going to bring you bread. So, where did meat come in? Did we miss something in the Psukim? Did the Psukim leave something out? Does bread mean food? Okay, we'll see that in Ramban.
Man cannot live by bread alone.
Correct. The bread's got to be something. Bread is for the two. Bread is on the both sides of the hamburger.
It tasted what they wanted it to taste.
Okay, so it could be a taste of what it wanted to taste, but you'll see in a moment. Actually, there was a slav, the quail coming by.
Yes.
So the lechem may taste what it wants, but we're going to see it's real meat coming down. And Moshe says, just take the next couple of psukim, Moshe says to Aaron, speak to the Jewish people, come close because God has listened to your complaints. And when Aaron speaks to the Bnei Yisrael, Midbar, they turn to the wilderness and there's Kvod Hashem, this glory of God is seen with the cloud. And Hashem says Moshe as follows, he repeats it again and says, Ben Arbaim Tuchlu Basar, this is verse 12. At night, in the evening, they'll have Basar. Then now God speaks about evening. And then the evening, they have the slav that combine cover the machaneh, and in the morning in the morning there was a covering of tal around the machaneh, and the tal, the dew goes up, and there is this dak mechus dak kakvar laris. There's some kind of thin, frosty kind of thing that's on the land, and they said to them, each person said, Manhu, what is this? Mahu, they called it Man, and the God, Moshe says, this is the bread that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has promised to you. And they collected it, and the rest of the story is on Friday they collected twice as much. And on every day, Moshe said, don't leave over till the next day. People left over, it became wormy, it became rotten, and Moshe was angry with them. Every day they collected, on Friday they got twice. Moshe said, why they came to Moshe, why is there twice? And Moshe says to the people, this is what Hashem said, you have Shabbat, there's no month, so you got twice as much on Friday, which will last till tomorrow, and in fact it won't get moldy tomorrow, right?
This is a sort of a buffet mentality, where people go and
Keep filling.
load up the plates like
Right.
it's
Correct.
like they're going to be hungry again.
Correct. And the end of the story was the next day they went out and they looked for man, and there was no they kept the man till the next day, and there was no one, and it remained good from Friday to Shabbos.
There's never any mention of water to drink.
So there is this miraculous well of Be'er Miriam that travels around with them, and there actually is a reference to water.
Is there?
Yeah, the first half of the parsha has where they complained the water was not potable. Right. And this is the other case where Moshe goes and is actually told to hit the rock, not the same story as we found that 38 years later when he's told to speak to the rock. Okay, so they do have situations where there is lack of water. There are oases in the wilderness.
No,
But
but
it's probably
they're
easier to
traveling.
find it. Yes, you have to know where the oases are, but at the same time, having found the oases, you may not find food because food is going to be very sparse. Right? You got to catch the animal on the hoof, or you've got to be able to kind of find a way to get some kind of produce from whatever desert plants there are.
Dates.
Dates would be a good example, but that's probably about the dates around the oases. And they're not. Yeah.
So the slough that came to it, that was a bird, right?
Right.
Was it a bird?
A quail.
Quail. Is it a quail? Is in English?
It's a quail in English. Is it a quail in English?
No, I'm saying that's the name of the.
Yes, it's a tiny bird. It's a machlokas whether a quail is a kosher bird or not. There are different traditions. I believe the OU says it is, and I think up here they say it's not. Okay. In other words, and it's not. By the way, it's not all types of quail. Certain types of quail, but you can get quail in the United States that's kosher slaughtered, but it's a very, very small bird. It's not. It's like the size of a dove. It's when you cut it back, it's tiny.
Yeah, you see them frozen here.
You see quails, kosher quails?
No, what do you call them?
The eggs. No.
Cornish.
Not Cornish hens.
The frozen ones. They're
Right.
about this
So
big.
this is a different type of species. But it's like the size of a Cornish hen. It's tiny. It's very small.
Yeah, no, I've seen it. I used to go hunting for them.
Right. Okay. So, but you can get it, but it just understand and apparently the birds, according to the measures, flew very low, so they simply were able to just grab the bird net them as they went by and catch them as they flew by, as opposed to trying to, okay, or raise
It's like
them.
a pheasant, right?
I guess this is.
Except pheasant's bigger.
Probably pheasant's bigger. Quail is a very small bird.
What about the little birds, the sparrows and all that? Are they edible?
Are they edible? I don't know if they're kosher birds. I don't know if sparrows are kosher birds. Doves and pigeons are, but there's not. There's a lot of fat on pigeons, so there's not that much underneath it. And by the way, I believe the chickens in those days were much smaller than chickens of today. Probably like the Cornish hens, the chickens that we know from the days of the Mishnah and Talmud. They're not humongous birds. Comparatively speaking. Okay, let's go see what the Ramban says. This is the Ramban on 16:4. Where's our Ramban, people? Okay, you got the Hebrew English. Good. There's another Hebrew English. How many Hebrew English? You got the one that we brought, or you got your own? This is yours.
The one
That's here. Okay, good. Okay, I have another one for. There we go. Right. Okay, it's a long Ramban. That's why I wanted to do this because we can't do it at the end of the day. Okay. Let me just find it. 16:4. Let me just find it. My
Beginning of 16?
1 second. Might not be the beginning of 16. Let me find it in my thing. I'm in the wrong chapter. It's not the. It's. I'll tell you where we're going to start. Hold on. Give me a moment. I'm having trouble finding pages. Right. No, it's the second half of the Ramban where it says Lamana Nasenu Hailech B'Toratiyim Lo. It's pasuk Dalid.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, but there's the first half is really about a lot of technical stuff. why it says matar mamtir lachem lechem min hashamayim. Matar usually refers to rain. How can food rain down from heaven? That's what the Ramban talks about. And lechem, it can sometimes mean not just bread, it can refer to anything that is solid. So that's the beginning of the Ramban. L'man anasenu ilech b'torati. You found it? You didn't find it?
No,
Give me a sec. This is Breshit. That's the first problem. Shmot Ted Zayin. Give me Chatzi Daka. In the middle of Shin Samach Gimel, in the middle, right next to footnote 23. Right after footnote 23, you'll see a different kind of print. Laman Anasenu. Okay, that's the Dibor Matchiel. Where is it? What page?
375.
Laman Anasenu. Okay. So this goes back. God says, I'm going to bring you the man. And you're going to, and in order that I will test you, L'mana Nasenu, to see whether you're going to go in my ways or not. And this may have been actually right before you walked in. I don't remember if you were here for that when we still were trying to talk about that and read it in Pasuk. Okay? Maybe before you walked in, before someone walked in. It was shortly after I walked in. So Hashem says to Moshe in response to the complaints of the people that I'm going to bring down lechem and hashamayim v'yatzam v'laktu d'var yom b'yamod, they'll collect every day. Laman anasenu, in order that I will test you. Hayelech b'torasim lo. Yes, you were here for that. Okay. So what's the test all about? So Ramban quotes Rashi. Laman anasenu hayelech b'torati. Im yishmru mitzvot atliyot bo. The first interpretation, according to Rashi, is God is testing whether they're going to keep the mitzvot, the commandments, not the mitzvot that we talk about, Taryag mitzvot, the commandments related to this bringing of the man. What did God say? What were the commandments that the Jewish people, had to do to get the man, or when the man came down? They could only take 1 day's time. They couldn't leave over. They were to collect twice as much on Friday. God commanded the Jewish people, these are the rules you have to play by. So when it says Laman Anasenu, to test you, I'm going to test you to see if you follow the simple rules that I give you. This is not 613 commandments because they haven't gotten to Sinai yet. Basic rules like drive on the right side of the street, stop at the stoplight. Make sure that you only take what you need for the day, because if you took more, you're not going to get more. Make sure you don't leave it overnight. Make sure you collect twice on Friday. Make sure that you don't, and don't expect to find it on Shabbos. So this is what Rashi says: you shouldn't leave over. You shouldn't go on Shabbat to collect. Lashon Rashi. This is what Rashi says. And by the way, you may know there's a custom many people have to put out breadcrumbs on Shabbat Shira. That's the Shabbat. Yes, and that is because
the birds.
Yes, there is a reason. The reason deals with the man, because Moshe said to the people, "Don't put out man you will not find it on Shabbos." So Dasan and Aviram, the proverbial bad guys of the Bnei Israel, went out early Shabbos morning and they threw out some of Friday's man, so they could come and say, "Moshe, you're wrong. You see that the man came down on Shabbos." And the birds came down early before anyone got up, and they chewed up the man and ate it, or didn't chew it up, they have teeth, they pecked at the man, and therefore when everybody came and there was no man left. And in honor of that, we honor the birds by putting out food for them on Shabbat Shira. And unfortunately, usually it goes to the squirrels. But I've seen birds that are actually awake. This is such a mild winter.
So the trick is to load up the bread with cayenne pepper. The squirrels are very sensitive.
The birds are not?
The birds have no sense of smell at all.
Wow. Okay, there you go. And we don't yet have snow on the ground, so you can actually put it on the ground and they will not get swallowed by the snow. So you have a good opportunity this year. So anyway, Rashi says, what was the test? The test was, I give you rules. Now I'm going to test to see if you remember what the rules are and carry the rules. Fairly straightforward. This is what Rashi says. Ramban says this is not correct. Vein ze nachon, because that's really about keeping the laws about the man. The looks from the pasuk that God says, I'm giving you man, to give you a test. The test is inherent within the man itself. The purpose of the man is not the secondary rules, but not leaving over and not going out on Shabbat. The purpose of the man itself is some kind of test. So that's what the Ramban disagrees with Rashi. So the Ramban says, here's what it means. Aval hukmo shamar. But this is what it means to say when it says in Dvarim chapter Chet, Bamidbar, when Moshe at the end of his life in Dvarim chapter 4 recounts what happened to Jewish people when they came out of Egypt and eventually came to Sinai and crossed the sea, blah, 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 the Meraglim and so forth. He says, God gave you man Bamidbar in the wilderness, Asher lo yadun avotecha, which your fathers never saw before, never tasted, Laman nanotecha, Laman nasotecha, in order to give you a trial and in order to test you, in order to give you good at the very end. So in other words, the very giving of the man, you see from Dvarim chapter Chet, that the very giving of the man was a Laman Nasotecha, Nisayon. The Pasuk says, he gave you man Machacha man Bamidbar, Laman Anoscha, Laman Anosecha, in order to test you. So the testing is, Ken Yisayon Hulahem. This was the test. What was the test in the man? Shlo Haya Bi'adam Mazon. They had no food. V'lo Yiru Lahem Eitzah Bamidbar Rakaman. They had no other choice except to eat the man. Shlo Yadu Mitchila Mahu. They didn't know what it was. V'lo Shemu Me'avotam. They never heard about the man. They had no tradition what this really was. You had to trust that this food was going to work. Because they had no idea what this was. They had no tradition about the man. Their ancestors never ate man. V'yored lahem dvayom b'yomo. And every day it came down precisely what they needed. V'yaravu elav. And as a result, they would be hungry for the man because they had no other food. And it only came down for that day's period. So the Ramban says the test was, would they follow God into the wilderness, where the only thing they're going to eat is this man? They had no clue what the long-range effects would be. Sometimes we have foods that they, genetically modified foods. We don't know what the long-term effects are going to be. They had no idea what long-term or short-term effects was going to be. You go traveling, you see something that is so unusual, you never saw it before, would you consider eating it? You don't know. Forget kosher, not kosher. You don't know it's going to be healthy. Will it be a diuretic? Will it make you ill? Will it make you sick? Can you digest it? What is there? What is edible? What isn't edible? How do you eat it? You ever get these strange fruits for Rosh Hashanah? You say, which part do we eat? What, do I eat the shell? Do I eat the skin? Don't I eat the skin? So there's the same thing. This is something brand new they never saw. And guess what? That's the only thing on the menu. So the test is here, will they follow Hashem? Because God is telling you, if you follow me, this is all what I'm going to serve you. So the test, according to Rashi, the test was, would they do the laws about preparing for the man or taking care of the man? According to the Ramban's approach, would they actually follow the Almighty into the wilderness where the only diet would be to get the man? Not what you said before, okay? We didn't come to your interpretation yet.
So weren't they already in the Midbar?
Yeah, but they're going to keep going with God. This is just, they haven't even gotten to Sinai. Okay, so we are. It actually told us when it was. It is on. Right, they are on the 15th day of the second month when they came out of Mitzrayim. So they're a month out. They leave Egypt on the 15th of the first month. This is 1 month later.
But they're already in a place with no food.
Correct. But now they got to keep. So do they keep going ahead, or do they turn around and go back to Egypt? Remember, what was the complaint? The complaint of the Jewish people was, would we have died on the flesh pots of Egypt? They still remember Egypt. Let's go back. And they're really not that far in. Actually, you know what? Let me finish the Ramban. I'll show you on the map where this actually is. So because we've identified this as Elim and Midbar Sin, between Elim and between Sinai. So they're going into the wilderness, but they're not fully in yet. So they still have an opportunity to turn around. So that's the test. Will you follow me, says God, into the wilderness? And this is what Moshe also says to them. Or this is what Hashem actually also says to them in chapter 8, in chapter 8 in Dvarim. First pasuk was, Moshe says that God gave you man in the wilderness to test you. What was the test? To follow God into the wilderness. And then Moshe continues in chapter 8 in Dvarim, the next pasuk, that you will remember the entire way that you traveled with God for 40 years in the wilderness, in order that you were given trials and you were tested, that you would test it to see if you would have in your hearts to follow God's mitzvot or not. Because God could have taken them through an inhabited area. He took the Jewish people into a wilderness that had snakes and serpents and scorpions. The only thing they had for 40 years was this bread that came from the heavens every day for its sufficient amount. To test them, give them good at the end. They'll have the reward of the amunah that they have to the Jewish people at the very end, that they were able to follow God. And I already explained, says the Ramban, when it says nisayon, I talked about the nisayon when Avram had a nisayon, which is that God only gives a person a test when He knows the person can follow through, when the person can actually pass the test. So Hashem is only giving the person, and why does the person get that test? The Almighty can give the person additional reward. God knew that Avram would take Yitzchak up to the mountain. It wasn't really a test, but having had the opportunity to be willing to sacrifice his son allowed Avram to show that he was willing to make that outwardly, take him the potential into the practical, and as a result, Avram was able to get the reward for following God's command. If it never happened, Akedat Yitzchak, Avram would not get that particular reward for that particular event. So therefore, God knew that Avram would do it. God wanted to multiply the amount of reward He gave to Avram, so He gave him a test, knowing that he would pass and get additional reward. God knows the Jewish people will follow Him to the desert. He gives them the test to say that they will follow the Almighty without question, even though the only thing they're going to eat is going to be man, and they don't know yet it's for 40 years. But God knows that they follow Him wherever He will go, and that will multiply the reward that they will get by following God's command. So the whole thing is part about the nisayon. This is called a test because God wants to give us additional reward for what we follow God's commands.
Just for the sake of rewards.
For giving, yes, because God wants to reward us. The opportunity of this world is to do what God wants, that we can make.
I understand better if this was like to form us in such a way, to develop us. Generations to come, we will know that this is something that we did and will push us forward. But just they got the words.
So that is also going to be there as well. If we are committed to God in the most difficult situations, then we actually have shown our commitment. But it was never a question that we would do that. A person becomes strong when they actually take their potential and carry it out in the practical.
Right.
In other words, if let's say you know that you can run a marathon race, but you haven't trained for it. But knowing that you could do this and training for it, the training for it will make you a better person or a better runner, right? Even though you know that you could have done it all along. So having the opportunity to be tested in a higher level or a more difficult level makes the person more of a committed individual practically, not just integrally in his person's mind.
Makes it easier for them to say Na'aseh v'nishma.
It makes it, yes, but this is simply about following God. It's not about commandments necessarily. Na'aseh v'nishma means we accept everything you want us to do. This is simply just following God. They may not know what Na'aseh v'nishma is at this point. Right? This is more. I'm going into a place. This is the last gas. It says last gas station for 200 miles. 200 kilometers. If you don't gas up now, that's going to be it. You have no place to fill up.
When you say follow God, you mean
literally. And in fact, 40 years later, Moshe says that's exactly what happens. In the recap of what the man is, the same term is used to test you by giving you the man to follow God into the wilderness. It's a nisayon. What was the test? What's the test? They did it. God didn't know they were going to do it. The answer is yes, they did according to Ramban, but God wanted to multiply their reward. Not the only reason, but it's just what the test is all about, why this particular test was there. So
how do you compare a test in school as compared to this test? What is the objective?
Well, this is a very loaded question. The real test should be to test the skills the student has learned. Now, tests usually have base facts that the student is supposed to study. But the real summative test or summative assignment doesn't only have to be a test; it could be an assignment. Should be that the student can show and demonstrate the skills that they've learned and acquired from this course. Now, what are the skills? The skills can be analysis. Right? The skills is not only what date was the British North America Act, but having had the British North America Act, how did that impact upon the development of the country? So you need to take all the facts and put them together and make it work. But the student becomes a better person by having thought out how to analyze and all these facts and put them together.
Yeah.
The same way, so that's a test is developing the potential of the student. Right? It's a potential of the student being developed the same way that the potential of the Jew is being developed here in the wilderness by following God. It is analogous to some extent.
Emunah is not really a test. It's faith.
Correct. But it's taking the potential for your emunah and giving it a practical expression. So it's developing your ability to put your emunah, I would say, to the test. That's a tautology. Putting your emunah to the practical carrying out of how much you can do the emunah.
But in school, first you learn something,
right, and
then you're tested on it. Here, they're just being tested without learning it. What have they learned?
Well, they learned. They saw that God brought 10 plagues. They saw that God brought drowned the Egyptians. They did learn. They learned about what God can do. They saw the powers of God. The 10 plagues that were done to Pharaoh were as much a lesson to Pharaoh as they were to the Jewish people, who saw that this is what can happen. So it is some of the learning experience, like going through a course of study. It's like having some exposure.
Yeah, but they weren't taught how to live in the
now they're giving this. Now they're giving the practicum. In other words, having seen what God can do and the power that God can save you, the same God can take you in the wilderness as well for 40 years, or not just for 40 years, take you in the wilderness and look after you the same way He took you through that. So you had the crash course literally. Now you're going to have the practicum, which is you want to follow me, you got to go into the wilderness, and this is what you're going to eat. But I guarantee you that I will bring you food every day. Every day you're going to get manna. That's the part of the course that's given. That's not the thing. It's a chumash. Okay. That's a Ramban. So, yeah, sure, yeah, okay. Okay. No, it's not the same pages. It's Shin Ted Vav, I think. Okay. Okay, so in other words, we have two interpretations of what the test of Ramban is. Once again, approach number one is Rashi, right, to learn the rule that they have to carry out the rules of not going out the second day and taking only what they need, not leaving it over. Second approach is the Ramban, that it's a test to develop the potential of the Jewish people to be faithful in the Almighty. By following God and knowing that there is no other alternative, there are no restaurants along the road, there's no cities along the road, there's no one else living there, this is an uninhabited area, that they were going to actually be following and putting their faith in God. So it's a development of emunah in Hashem. Okay, the next question. But not the next question, the next interpretation. The Rambam writes in his Mor Nevuchim, Imani writes in his Mor Nevuchim, what is the test here? Ladat kol yodea lanasot hayesh toelet bavodat hakel. The test was that they should learn that by following God will always look after them. In other words, according to it, it's a little different, almost like the Ramban, but not exactly the same thing. The Ramban says the test was would they have faith in God. The Rambam says the test is to learn that God will never abandon, God will always provide for them. In other words, the test I'm giving you is that you will learn by experiencing being with me in the wilderness with the man, that I will always provide for you. In other words, which is, if you follow me and you serve God with all that I ask you to do, is there going to be some purpose to this? And will there be enough to survive? Will you get enough to get by? And the Ramban simply says it would be better written not Laman Anaseno, but Laman Yinnaseh, that he will test you. The Ramban says it's not perfectly syntactically correct, but it's really saying that the test really is to learn that will you keep the mitzvot of Hashem? Will you do what Hashem requires of you? Because ultimately God will look after you. So it's almost the same as the Ramban, but it's not really about faith as much as keeping the mitzvot. This is a precursor to Sinai. If you will keep my mitzvot, I will look after you. So
we read the Bashal of the Man.
I'm sorry?
So we read the Bashal of the Man
this week. Today. Yes, today. I don't know why today on Tuesday.
Moshe.
Yes.
Question for you. Do we have any scripture sources for the actual life of the people in the desert, like the hardships the
What?
happiness, the
We don't-
treachery. Do we have anything like
We
that?
don't know what they ate for breakfast.
But do we know how they lived? Do we know how they went about
So-
every day? Was life extreme?
We don't have the daily record of what happens on little stuff. Okay. In other words, we don't know what happens every day when they wake up. We don't have a daily routine. We have the highlights of what happens. The Torah is really a book of laws. The highlights that occur, or the events that occur, come to teach us certain important things. But what goes on every day, and how they get along tribe to tribe, and what's going on, we can only really begin to guess.
I can hardly read this.
Okay.
I can hardly read this.
Okay, it's a copy of a copy. Okay, now. Okay, so let's come back to this. So in other words, so we've given really 3 interpretations, 2.5 interpretations about what the man was. Now the Ramban deals with something else. How come if they asked for man, and how come if God said, how come if they asked for food and God said, I'm going to give you lechem, how come suddenly they got purged as well? Right? How did this love come along? Vinelo hiskir kan rak dvar haman. That at this point, when they requested from Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem responded and said, He's only going to bring them man, shu alechem shimtir lahem. This is the bread that rained down upon them, that came down. Avakasher Amar Moshe lehem. When Moshe spoke to the people, he said, "B'teit Hashem lachem bo'erev, basar lecho v'lechem abog l'spo." And Moshe relates it to the people. He says, God will bring you basar. I'm going to bring you meat. God will bring you meat at night, and lechem in the morning l'spoa. So how did suddenly where did the idea come in about bringing the birds or the meat if it wasn't mentioned when Hashem spoke to the Jewish people, spoke to Moshe? So Ramban gives a couple of interpretations, and you'll tell me which one makes more sense to you. First answer, he says, Yodanu ki akol nemar lo, aval akatov yikatzer b'dvorim nechpadim b'la matzifuya b'sipur. Sometimes things are left out when initially it is given, and then repeated. In other words, the conjecture of the Ramban is that God told Moshe, I'm going to bring you bread to the people, which is the man, and I'm also going to bring you meat. Right, and the Torah just simply listed the most important of the two, which was it should be bread. And then when Moshe went to speak to the people, he recounted the full version, including what was not recorded in the first part. And he says that's not so unusual. That sounds like it's radical. Kasher skart lecha pamim rabim. Ramban says it happens a couple of times, a number of times for the Torah, where when it first presents something, it doesn't give you the whole story, and then later when it repeats it or goes over different parts of it, different details are added. Lefamim lo yaskir echad klal. Sometimes it's not even mentioned as well in the parsha, as it says, this talks about the actual amount of the omer of the man that was given. At the very end of the story about the man, Moshe says that God commanded me to put aside one piece of man, which they kept in the Mishkan. Nowhere do we find that God commanded them to do so. So in other words, the original command is not there, but Moshe then says that Moshe does follow the command of God, even though the command is not mentioned. So that's one interpretation. So in other words, God commanded Moshe and told Moshe, I'm going to bring both, except it wasn't recorded the first time. Second answer is, the second answer to the Ramban is that the lechem refers to all kinds of food. Lechem can refer to carbohydrates, and lechem can also refer to anything that we take in. Lechem, like not living by bread alone, but sometimes that means bread. Sometimes bread is called bread because it's the staff of life, but it means like that's the meal, right? In other words, like you have bread. Like, I don't know, you walk into a restaurant, they don't do it anymore sometimes, but they used to always bring bread out to the table first.
Basket, they still do.
They still do, yeah. They do, okay? They bring a basket of bread, but you didn't ask for the bread, but bread is actually the skeleton of what the meal is. So when it says, Hashem says to Moshe, I'm going to bring them bread, it doesn't mean bread, which is the man, it means sustenance. Yitachen shamayim nimam telachem lechem and alman refers to the man and the slav. Kitein loket lahem shilatam shishalu lechem labasar. Because God is going to accede to their request, which the request was really to have meat, to have bread and meat itself. So Moshe said, when Moshe came to the people, he split them apart only because the timing element was different. And Moshe doesn't know exactly what time they're going to be, but normally people have bread in the morning, you got cereal when you get up, and you have your meat meal, your protein meal in the evening for dinner. So Moshe said to the people, the same thing's going to be. You're going to have basar in the evening, Bo'erev, and lechem in the morning you're going to have, which ends up being the man. But really, they both were included in the concept of lechem, refers to all foods together. That's the second approach. So really, the last part of the Ramban is just more of a detail. But the key to the testing of the man was would they follow would they trust God, right? And would they have the emunah in God? And second of all, would they follow God's commandments? And according to Rashi, would they actually do all the other mitzvot? So let's see. What you had, Rafael had suggested, the test of the man was could they rely upon food that they couldn't store away? That's the real test. Is the Ramban saying that?
Rely on food that was never seen.
In other words, could they rely upon food that you couldn't store? In other words, you wake up in the morning, you go to your pantry,
right,
and there's whatever you're going to eat: cereal, cake, bread, face, whatever you want, right? And if you run out, if you don't have, you can go down the block and you go to some supermarket. First supermarket is out, you go to the next supermarket.
Every day the people were given
only for that day.
Yeah, so
the test is, remember, the test is not just to follow God. The test is really can you live a life that you can't store ahead for? Can you live from day to day?
If you believe you can.
So that's really goes back to what the Ramban is saying, that it's about belief in Hashem. So what you had said, what Rafael had said, really is part of the process of the belief in Hashem, that you're going to rely upon Hashem giving you every day. But that's actually very difficult. It means that you have to really put your faith in the Almighty is going to provide you. There's no wiggle room. There's no spare tire.
This has been now for 30 to 100 years. This is not been a question for the ages.
Correct.
Really.
But this is the question for these people. That's what the test actually is. The test, in other words, the good news and the bad news. The good news is they're going to provide for you every day. The bad news is they're not going to provide for you every day until that day. So you're literally going from day to day.
No snacking, eh?
No snacking. Snacking on the day. But no snacking, no putting it ahead for tomorrow's snack. No putting it on your pillow, okay? No putting it next to your bed. No hiding it for the next day when your wife can't find it, okay? That's a very serious test.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's about the man. Okay, next Ramban I want to do, I told you I'm going to leave crossing the sea till either the end of today or we'll come back to it on Thursday. Next part is about Amalek. What do you know about Amalek? The bad guys. Yeah?
Amalek is the arch enemy.
The arch enemy. What do you know about them historically? Who is Amalek?
You don't know Amalek?
Amalek
Went to school with him.
Descendant of Esau. Right. So go back to, just look for a moment, 192.
Where would that be, Moshe?
Go 192 in the Chumash. Here, look in the Chumash, 192. Okay. Just look in Bereshit. This should be the end of Vayishlach. Page 192. We have the genealogy of Esau. This is the last time we hear about him until Amalek shows up. And we're told who Esau marries. Let's see, do I get the right page? Oh yeah. Okay. So these are the generations of Esau. Esau takes his wives from the daughters of Canaan. Ada, who's the daughter of Elon the Hittite, Alivamah, Batana, who is a Chivi, and he takes Basmat Bat Yishmael, who's the sister of Nevayot. So he has wives from one wife from Yishmael, one wife who's a Hittite, one wife who's a Chivi. We're told who they actually are, who their children are. And then if you skip down all the way to verse 12, okay, he has a Pilegesh. A Pilegesh was a concubine, which was not a full wife. Vatimna hoita Pilegesh l'Elifaz ben Esav. The Timna was a Pilegesh not to Esav, but to Esav's son Elifaz. Elifaz is Esav's older son. And she gives birth to Elifaz to who? At Amalek. So Amalek is the grandson of Esau.
Right.
This by a concubine of his son Elifaz. Right? Amalek. There's Amalek. So,
and she gave birth to Amalek.
right. Which means, by the way,
the same Amalek that we talked about.
the same Amalek, correct. The same Amalek.
It means we're related.
Which means we're related, which means, it means more than that, it means it's part of the continuing struggle between Esau and between Yaakov. Okay, so notice it's not simply a strange people that show up, as we normally read them, arch enemies who are against us. They're actually mishpucha, right? Okay. And that's what makes it such a difficult kind of battle, besides the fact that they're great warriors. Good? What do we know about the Jewish people at this point? Are they warriors?
They're going to be.
No. No, they're not. They're just slaves.
They're slaves. How do you know they're not warriors, by the way? How do you know they don't have an army?
How do we know?
Although it did say they came out
They had
of machines.
They came out from Mushim, they came out with arms. But how do you know they're really not a good army? What do you know about conflict until now with the Jewish people? Well, I told you we skipped the splitting of the sea. What happens before the splitting of the sea?
They have conflict amongst themselves?
Well,
Is that what you're alluding to?
No, I'm not. I'm not alluding to that. They're coming to the sea, and behind them are coming what?
They are.
They're afraid.
And they say, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Well, they are not trained to fight them. You wouldn't expect them to fight them because they're slaves.
Slave mentality.
Slave mentality. Plus, these are their masters. It's not even a fair kind of comparison. So even if they were soldiers and they were trained, they probably wouldn't fight against their own masters that they had just left, days before, 7 days earlier. But it's clear that they have no training whatsoever. They're terrified, and of course, God saves them by splitting the sea, and they go through the sea, yada yada yada. And here they are. They've gone through that, and it's not much later. It's maybe it's a month plus or so. They got the month, which we're told was on the 15th of the second month. It's 1 month later. And then afterwards, they continue and they reach Refidim. And this is page 390 on the bottom of the page. And Amalek shows up. 390 in your Chumash here. 390. 390.
When they went through the Mippah, they were organized.
They were organized.
They were organized.
They were
organized like it was almost like an army.
They were not trained as an army.
They're not trained as an army.
They're trained as marchers. They're trained to follow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
They had no training on the way, or
maybe so.
They were 40 years in the desert.
So let's say 40 years in the desert, they had training. But how much training would they have within a few weeks after they came out of Egypt?
How could they have training?
How could they have training? They were slaves. Now, the fact that they march in formation is not that unusual if you recognize they're slaves. Slaves are used to following things in order.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So they obviously learn how to train to fight because they're going to fight under Joshua.
That's right.
And they're going to fight under people when they at the end they're going to fight over on Evar Yarden with certain people, Og and Melcha Bashan. There are fights that they have. That's at the end of the 40 years. This is a month later.
This is a month later.
The only fight we see, Moshe, is the fight of Moshe when he kills the Egyptian.
Right. Correct.
It's really, when you think about it.
Because he grew up as a free person. He had the vision to understand what freedom was, what values were. Slaves don't have that vision.
That's right. So the Levites were fighters.
The Levites were fighters.
Well, they killed the ones who worshipped the gods.
True, they were given, but it wasn't
And
really
they were not slaves.
It wasn't a fair fight. They were just given swords and said, "Go kill those who worship the golden calf." It's not a fight. That's a massacre. The people that had nothing to respond to.
They were disciplined, followed orders, and they were not slaves before.
True.
But you're talking about warfare.
Right, we're talking about an organized group of people of Amalek.
Smashing
Correct.
somebody else in
Correct.
the anger.
Thousands and thousands of chariots.
Even if they were.
So we don't know how many chariots there are.
They've been afraid of the chariots, anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, let's look at the verses. Then we'll see what the Ramban says about how serious this battle is. I'm sorry.
There would be, when they crossed the Yam Suf, the Mitzrayim were all decimated. So why would they be afraid?
No, we're asking
Just before that.
So before that, they were terrified. Their masters are chasing them. Right? There's still a power authority symbol that's after them. That's their authority.
That's there.
The blacks of North America took them 100 years really to understand what freedom was.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I come from the United States. The Civil War was in 1860 and it's finished in 1865. It was the end of the Civil War. It's not until the 1950s and 60s when you have people like Martin Luther King and you have the march and the real recognition of the beginning of the process of equality that they themselves couldn't break out of that.
Still don't have that.
And they still don't have it. There still is inequality, correct? But there's at least a sense of understanding what freedom is. They didn't have that sense. We know that, for example, at the end of the Civil War, when the slaves were free, many of them went to work back to their own plantations. They worked for minimal, room and board, even though they were legally free. They had no vision what to do to be a free person. Besides the prejudices that still existed, just in terms of the actual becoming free.
I have a different interpretation on that. If they study Torah, it'd be a different life.
For the blacks.
Yes.
Well, they actually many of the spirituals that the slaves sang were based upon the Torah in Egypt. They used coming out of Egypt as a very strong symbol in their own faith development. These are people who were brought to America, who actually were probably missionized and baptized, and they ended up having their own kind of sources of tradition. So, but they looked very strongly at the story of the Jews coming out of Egypt as a story of the blacks coming out of slavery, and they hoped for this when they were enslaved.
A lot of their songs were based on
Yes.
like the river of Babylon.
Yes, and Go Down Moses.
We went back into
Go
slavery.
down Moses.
We went back into slavery?
Well, in a sense, we went back in. When we lost theirs.
No, we did not go back into slavery. We did not go back into slavery.
The Europeans weren't in
no, they were not enslaved.
They weren't enslaved, but they were.
They didn't have rights as citizens.
They didn't have rights. They knew nothing about fighting.
They were confusing slavery and fighting.
Yeah.
Correct. They did not practice combat.
I don't mean slavery. I didn't mean slavery in that sense.
They were passive. They were peace-loving people.
You could
correct.
be a slave and be a fighter.
Because armies were basically national entities. Armies were organized by the kings, by nobility, right? The ideas of knights in armor. Each king had his own set of knights, so each nobility had their own set of knights to defend them. And there was a symbiotic relationship between the knights and between the king who they pledged allegiance to, or the church. Church had their own knights. Anyways, let's come back to Amalek. So I want to make sure we do this. Vayava Amalek, Vayilachem Yisrael b'Refidim. This is verse 8-9. And Vayima Moshe el Yoshua. Moshe says, Yoshua, choose for us people. V'tziyilachem b'Amalek. You go fight the people. How come Moshe doesn't go fight the people? How come Moshe is not the leader? Why does he have Joshua lead the people? Moshe is a young man. He brought the people out. He's not a young man. He's 80 years old. But he's still not an old person. He's going to live 40 more years.
That's a good question.
Okay.
Training him, or are you putting him to...
He's training Joshua. Maybe. Okay. Well, let's see what Moshe does.
There's a thank you somewhere. You can't.
He understands this must come from Hashem.
But they must come from Hashem, and therefore he doesn't want to be the one.
Then he wants to do it with connection to Hashem.
Okay. But Moshe's not part of the answer is Moshe's not going to sit back and just say, Yoshua, you take over, and I'm going to watch up in the luxury box to see what's happening, right? He says to Yoshua, you go Yilachem Amalek. Machar tomorrow Anuchi Nishav Rosh Gevah. I'm going to go up to the top of the Gevah, the overlook, the precipice. So Moshe says, I'm going to be the one to raise my staff. I'm going to take the Matelakim. And you, Yoshua, are going to lead the people because I got a job to do looking over with my staff. So Moshe is not giving Yoshua as much the leadership training as much as he says, I got to do something more important. As important as it is for you to lead the people to fight, or whatever kind of troops you have to fight, I'm going to be the one that kind of has the connection to God to bring God's power here, because without God's power we ain't going to win. This is like when Jews came from the Holocaust and we came to Israel from the DP camps, the detention camps, and they were able to land, and it was the War of Independence. They right away gave these people arms and shipped them off. These were refugees. They had no training whatsoever. They took them right to the front. Many of them died. Many of them came right from the horrors of the concentration camps to the detention camps to Israel and were put into battle. They had no training. They had no time. It was an emergency situation. So you, Yoshua, are going to put together whatever force you have. I'm going to be the one to overlook it. And sure enough, Yoshua does what Moshe says to go fight Amalek. Moshe, Aaron, and Hur go to the top of the Rosh Gevah. When Moshe raises his hands, the Gavar Yisrael and the Jewish people are successful. V'kasher Yadav Gavar Amalek. When Moshe puts his hands down, then the Amalek people get stronger and they fight. So Moshe raised the hands. The Jewish people win. Moshe puts his hands down. The Amalek wins. V'idei Moshe k'videi. Moshe's hands get a little tired. It's hard to put your hands up that long. Try it. Vayichu Evan. They put a rock under his hands, his arms. And Vayisim Tachtav. They put underneath him. Vayeshev alav, and Moshe sits down on the rock. Moshe and Hur stand next to him and hold their hands up. So Moshe is sitting, and Aaron and Hur are holding up his hands. Mizeh echad. And Moshe's hands are emunah, are faithful until the end of the day when the sun goes down. Then Yoshua fights against Amalek and defeats Amalek. So Moshe is used raising his hand. What happened to Moshe's staff? I thought he's taking his staff up to the top of the precipice. Does he have a staff in his hand? We're just not told about it. Does he put the staff down? What do you need the staff for? Aaron is holding up Moshe's hands. Aaron and Hur are holding up Moshe's hands, and Moshe's hands are up. So what do you need his hands for? What do you need the staff for? Is the staff the same thing as the hands, except we're not mentioning it, the staff play a different role? What do you know about the staff until now? What does the staff do?
Well, we know that it turned into
a snake.
It turned into a snake, okay, but what does it do?
It taps
powers of Hashem to bring down the plagues on the Egyptians, whether it's Moshe's staff or Aaron's staff. They're all raising, some of them they're raising their hands, some of them they're using the staff to bring down the plagues from the Shemayim. It's using on the Yam Suf as well. So if you want to bring down something that's extraordinary, it seems that this staff has the power to do it. It's a special mateh that is given certain powers. Okay? And then Yoshua is fighting, then we have a mitzvah to remember about what Amalek did to us. Let's take a look at Ramban. I want to make sure we do this Ramban. It's a long Ramban. Hopefully we can do enough of it to make it work for us. And it's the Ramban on chapter 17, verse 9. It's almost towards the end of this parsha. Where would that be? Give it to me, I'll find it.
I've got to educate myself on all this stuff.
That's good. Okay. 79. 79. A second.
Yep.
Okay, this is here. Okay, one more question I forgot to ask you. What is the name of Yoshua? He's called Yoshua, right? Moshe says to Yoshua, choose people for us and go fight Amalek. Didn't Yoshua get his name when he was with the Meraglim, with the spies? What was his original name? Hoshea. So why is he called here Yoshua? Is this an anachronism? Did someone forget? Did someone put an extra yud in by mistake? So says the Ramban that he got the name at this point. He got the name Yoshua at this point, knowing Moshe somehow had a premonition this was going to help him later in life when he would finally be there with the spies. Okay, so everybody have 17:9. Vayoma Moshe Yoshua. Excuse me. It looks like from this pasuk that from Moshe, from all the days that he knew Hosea, he called them Yehoshua. Even though later on in Parshas Tisisa, he still called Hosea. V'chein katuv, and it says, Vayishma Yoshua et kol amreo, that when Moshe goes up to Har Sinai, and he comes down, he says to Yoshua, what's going on there? So it says, Vayishma Yoshua et kol amreo, that Yoshua heard the sounds of the people. Moshua's halfway up the mountain, and he's called Yehoshua. And when it says in the Meraglim story, which is in Bamidbar chapter 13, that's two, this is not the in Shemot, it's not Vayikra, it's going to be in Bamidbar. It says, Vayikra Moshe Hoshea ben Nun, Yoshua, he called Hoshea Yoshua. It doesn't mean then, it means Lamim B'Roshana Yidaber. It's talking about initially, it was called Yehoshua, initially, early on, Hodienu, Ki Zeh Hoshea ben Nun, Asher B'Charo B'Meraglim, Hu Asher Kro Moshe Yoshua. When Moshe chose him to be the spies, he chose the guy who was called Yoshua earlier on, 2 years prior. And that's how he normally interprets it. And according to the rabbis, which say that why was Hoshea called Yehoshua? Because he was called it then that God should save him from the advice of the spies. He should be an individual that would stand out. So it looks like he was given the name then. That it means that Moshe knew at this point had a prophecy that he would eventually go with the Meraglim. He called them now Korolot Hashem Hazeh. He called them now the name Yoshua, knowing that he would need it 2 years later when he'd be the Meraglim. Onemar, possibly it means Kios Kavalo Moshe to Hashem b'fnei Dashlei Kareo Od Yoshea v'yesh Mo Yeshua. Maybe now Moshe called him Yoshua, he called him 101. But his official name, his legal name was still Hosea. It's like you have, like my name officially is Maurice, I go by the name of Moshe. You all have these kinds of names, right? So the official name of Yoshua was still Hosea. At the going of the spies, he changed his name officially from Hosea to Yoshua, but he was calling him Yoshua all along. Okay, that's just the introduction. The reason that Moshe sends Yoshua to fight Amalek, because Moshe was going to pray by raising his hands. By raising his hands, this is like the Kohanim raise their hands to give us a bracha. It's going to raise his hands to God to bring down the blood to pray for the Jewish people. V'Allah Shaman went up there, Kadei Shirat Yisrael Nechamim, that he would see the people fighting. V'Yasim Eino Alehem L'Tova, he would put his kavanah, or when he see the people, for good, and he would have them in mind visually, so he could have them in mind mentally, in order to have the proper kavanah when he would daven to Hashem on their behalf. V'gam yehem miroto, they'll see him poresh kapav v'shmayim. They'll see Moshe raise his hands. Umarbebet tfilato, see him praying. V'yivtuchu bo v'yosifo mutzuk v'ora. They'll have greater faith and greater strength and greater heroism. Know that Moshe was praying. So it's a two-way street. Moshe can see the people and focus his kavanah when he davens to Hashem, save the people. The people can see Moshe's praying, and that gives them an additional kind of sense of gvura, of courage, and confidence that they're going to be successful. With Perkei Rabbi Eliezer, it says in the Perkei Rabbi Eliezer, another reason why Moshe goes up there, it says as follows: Kol Yisrael yotzu chutz l'aleim v'ruot Moshe pores al bercha v'hem kurim b'kem. So in the Medrash says that the Jewish people see the Moshe, that they leave their tent to go fight. They see Moshe praying. He's bowing in this case. They begin bowing and praying. They see Moshe nofel panav arza. They fall on the ground and v'hem noflim apnei arza. Pores kapav l'shmayim. We see Moshe raise his hands to heavens, and they raise their hands to heavens. Which teaches us that you have a connection between the Shliach Tzibur, the Chazan, and the people who are davening together. The idea of Tefillah B'Tzibur is everybody davens together. Whatever the Chazan does, we do. We have the repetition of the Amidah at the end of our silent Amidah, but basically we're davening together with the Chazan. V'pila Kadosh Baruch Hu Tamalei V'Tamo B'Yad Yeshua. In other words, the purpose of this is really about, according to this, that Moshe is praying, the Jewish people are praying, according to the first approach of the Ramban. Moshe is praying and the people get strength from seeing him pray. Moshe sees the people, he knows how to focus. According to the second interpretation, what Moshe is doing, the people are doing. What Moshe does, the people do. Moshe prays, they pray. Moshe bows, they bow. Moshe raises hands, they bow, they raise their hands. So Moshe is there to mimic Moshe, and it becomes a paradigm of Tefillah B'Tzibur. Okay, let's go on. Now, so what about the staff? And the reason he takes the staff, we already know he's praying and he's raising his hands for praying. When Moshe goes up to the top of the precipice, and he sees Amalek, and he's going to daven, he doesn't need the staff for davening. Natalia Dov Mate put his hands on the staff, and here the Ramban conjectures something brand new, which you probably never heard about. Lavi Alehem Makadera V'Cherev Yavdam. He invokes a plague of destruction and killing and complete desolation upon the Egyptians. So he has the hands for prayer. He has the staff to bring down an additional makkah upon the Egyptians not the Egyptians, the Amalekites at this battle. Kinyan Hanemar Yoshua, as we have a similar kind of thing that Yoshua has in the eye when they go into Israel 40 years later. The Te Bachidona Shev Yadecha, take the stick that's in your hand, Eloi over the eye, Kibirchaten, I'm going to give you to fight against the eye and be successful. You see that raising the staff can bring certain powers. So therefore, the hands are for prayer. The staff is for bringing the power of a God as a punishment, as a punishing power against the enemy itself. Happened with Yeshua 40 years later. Happens with Moshe here. So what do we got so far? Happened with the Makkah too. That's right. So therefore, the Makkah becomes a sign of bringing down power of the Almighty to punish the enemy. The Egyptians in Egypt, the Egyptians at the sea, and here the Amalekites fighting the Hebrews. So what's this battle all about? Okay, so there are two more parts to this. V'haya kol inyan hazeh shasa Moshe Rabbeinu, and this whole thing that Moshe Rabbeinu does to pray for the Jewish people, or that he has them pray together with him, that he bows and they bow, he prays, they pray, he raised the hand, they raise the hand. Why do they go through this kind of routine? Why? Because Amalek was a very strong and powerful and fearful enemy. The Jewish people were not trained for battle. They never went to battle. They never saw battle. Right? They talk about a soldier. When a soldier goes to battle the first time, they're a real soldier. So all the training until then is nothing. God said at the beginning of the parsha when they left out that God was afraid they'd see battle. God takes them along the plain where they're going to bypass all kinds of people because he's afraid they will turn back. Or Moshe was afraid that they were tired, as it says in Mishnah Torah and Sefer Dvarim. Therefore, it wasn't simply a battle of equals. Moshe was therefore concerned. You have all this invoking God's power against Amalek because this was the first battle they were not trained for. Prayer would need to make up for the lack of training. Okay, now here comes the last part. Here's the Ramban's crescendo about Amalek being a descendant of Esav. So Amalek is a descendant of Esav, and everything that happens in the Chumash, even as late as this parsha, is going to be a premonition of what will happen in the future. When we had the whole Sefer Breshit, so we finished with Breshit, but it's still Masi Avot Siman Labanim. Only now this is the next generation, this is the generation of the Israelites themselves. So this fight with Amalek becomes a precursor to the fight of Amalek's descendants, or Esav's descendants, because Amalek is a descendant of Esav, that will happen later in Jewish history, which is Galut Edom, the second exile that the Romans become, if you will, the Romans are seen as the inheritors of Esav, which is Amalek, which is the Romans, which becomes the exile that we're still in. So this battle is the battle that eventually is going to be the precursor of the battle we're in, being exiled.
Rome is also Edom, no?
And Rome is Edom.
So where's Moshe? I'm a little lost. Edom and Amalek.
Same thing.
Why do we go by the two distinct names?
One is the same reason many people have multiple names. No, same reason people have multiple names. The Torah says he's called Edom. Why is he called Edom? He came out, he was red. Right? His legal name, they said your name is Esav.
Okay, so Edom and Amalek.
Right? So it's and the Torah makes it very clear he has these two names. Which is the name on his birth certificate? Esav. Okay? But they call him Red. Esav the Red. Okay? So now here's the key though. This is all about this premonition to the future. Why was Moshe so afraid? It was not only about a numbers game. It was not only about not having trained warriors. And he simply had a ragtag group of ex-slaves who just got out of slavery for a month before. Moshe was terrified that Amalek would be successful because he is a descendant of Esav, and the bracha that Esav was given by the Zakein, by Yitzchak gave to Esav, you will live by the sword, you will survive by the sword. So this is not simply just a random person coming along. This is a person who can invoke the power of the blessing of Yitzchak to Esav. This is the descendant of Esav to be successful by battle. The battle with this family was the first battle we had, and it's going to be the last battle. The end of times is going to be a battle with the descendants of Amalek, who are the descendants of Roman, which becomes the Holy Roman Empire, which becomes Christianity, Amalek mizera Esav. Amalek comes from Esav, and as I showed you, saw it before. This was the first battle we have. This is the first battle we face. The first battle, we have to face the battle against Esav. This battle here with Amalek. And the final exile, which we're still in, this is the Rav Teichel's talking, right? The final exile that we haven't ended yet is the exile of Edom, the exile of Esav. That's the final exile. Kasher Yamun Rabotenu. She'anachnu, as it says in Masechet Avodah Zarah, Anachnu Hayom B'Galut Edom. We are still in the Galut of Edom, of the descendants of Esav. But Kasher Yunitzachu, when he will be finally defeated, When he and all the nations that are allied and associated with him will be defeated, Mimeno Nivashal Yalom will have the final eternal redemption. Kasher Amar V'Yalu Moshim B'Har Tzion L'Shpot Et Har Esav V'Yitol Hashem Amlucha. When the people will be saved, will come to Har Mount Zion to bring judgment against Mount of Esav, then God's kingdom will be set up. L'Hashem Hamlucha. V'nei kol asher asu Moshe v'Yoshua Mohem b'Rishonah. And whatever Moshe and Yoshua did here, in other words, this becomes the template to fight against Amalek, to fight against Esav. Yasu Eliyahu Mashiach ben Yosef im Zaram. Eliyahu and Mashiach ben Yosef, there'll be two Mashiachs, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. So Mashiach ben Yosef is the fighting Mashiach. We'll do with Zaram, Al Kainat Amet Moshe Badavar. Therefore Moshe actually needed to ensure that it would not fail. A fail at this point would change all of Jewish history. That's the real purpose of it. So this is the cataclysmic battle that will happen at the end of times. This becomes the precursor, the premonition of what will be. Starts with Esav and really ends with Esav.
So this wasn't a random battle.
This wasn't a random. There was high stakes.
So, we were commanded to kill Amalek here.
Yes.
When does the commandment end?
Well, we don't know who Amalek is.
Okay, so here's my question.
Yes.
Why? We're commanded to kill Amalek, yet the Jews are in this world to be the light amongst nations.
True.
That means we should be keeping them alive and be the light amongst them. Why should we kill them?
So the answer is because they are so antithetical to everything we stand for. However, it's already been pointed out we do not know who Amalek is. In other words, the nations, they're not like the Greeks today are not the Greeks of antiquity. The Egyptians today are not the Egyptians of antiquity. People have moved around. People have changed. The people who are living, you go for whichever country you wanted to go through. The conquering nations moved around the nations they conquered. One way that they ensured that people would remain docile was you took them from one country and moved them to another. We call it exile. They called it actually just forced movement, right? Forced relocation. They did this not to enslave the people. They did this to break their spirit, because you fight for the country you grew up in. You fight for the patriotism of your country. If now you've moved to another country, you're not going to fight the same way. You'll simply till your crops. So there's been such a confluence and mixture of people that have moved around. There's no longer pure Egyptians of antiquity. They're no longer pure Romans, pure Greeks. There's no longer pure any people except the Jewish people. We believe have kept ourselves separate, even though we have not lived in our country. Right. So practically speaking, you will not be able to find an Amalekite, which if you did would mean that you'd have to kill them, which is what the mitzvah is. But you're right. And that's why eventually the battle will be a battle against Amalek, and the Ramban says, and all those that are allied with him, even though we cannot identify who Amalek really is.
That's a pretty good idea.
Anyways, okay, for today. So I'll tell you what I want to do today. I wanted to just mix things up a little bit. We do Ramban, and I love Ramban, and I did some Ramban with you on Tuesday. But we want to change things around, do a little bit of Ibn Ezra today. Now, you've seen the Ibn Ezra been taken down by the Ramban, okay? Right, we're going to give the Ibn Ezra equal time. Now, what you never really get to see, you don't get to see, by the way, the Ibn Ezra and the Ramban duke it out, because unfortunately for the Ibn Ezra, he was dead by the time the Ramban came along. The Ibn Ezra dies in 1167, the Ramban is born in 1194. So there's 30 years between the two, could never meet, actually. But the Ramban does respect the Ibn Ezra and does accept it, but when he tends to take people down, he tends to take people down with force. There's no holds barred, and because Ramban does have certain strong ideas about how to do commentary, when he finds the Ibn Ezra said X and he feels it's Y, he makes it very clearly known. But the Ibn Ezra is an excellent commentary. The Ibn Ezra is a little more cryptic to read and understand. It's written in its style is not as direct as the Ramban, which you can read, and plus we have translations. But there are two pieces I chose today that we would do, and then we'll look at some piece from the Nesiva Shalom, because I thought they actually can shed some light about what takes place in the splitting of the sea. I guess the first question before we talk about that is, where did the sea split? Where did the Jewish people cross the sea? So I got two maps for you, the front to back, same page. Okay, there you go. This is from the Biblical Atlas of Dat Mikra. Okay, the map on 103 is a map that deals with the Jewish people coming out of Egypt. Doesn't really show the way, of course. And then the map on the next page shows where the Jewish people wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. It's the same map. It's the same map, and the names are pretty much the same. The second map on 119 just shows you really what are the expected trade routes that people may have gone through Sinai and where they would have expected perhaps to travel around. But the places don't really change. And that map is in Hebrew, so we'll just have to work our way through it. We know some identities of some of the places in Egypt where the Jewish people are going to come out from. And so, where Egypt is being settled is right around here. This is the Nile Delta. Okay, this is the fertile part of Egypt, the fertile crescent of Egypt. Right? This area here. Let's stay with page 103. Okay, so that's where the Jewish people would probably be coming out of from that area, and we're not quite sure exactly where exactly would be Goshen, where the Jewish people are. It probably based upon the other map, Goshen. Did it have Goshen here on this map?
Yeah.
The other map has Goshen. It's probably to the right. Somewhere around here is where we think Goshen is. So if the Jewish people were in a separate area, they probably would be around here. Egypt proper is over here, and the Jewish people would be somewhat separate. Some of the plagues talk about the fact that plagues happened in Egypt. They didn't happen in the land of Goshen. Some of the plagues don't make reference to that. So the Jewish people are going to come out from Goshen. They're really not, if you look at it, there's really not a sea. People often think they're going to cross the sea over here. Right? People often say, which kind of sea are they going to... Let me just put two back to back. Right. So this is the Yam Suf. Yam Suf is what we call the Red Sea. But people talk about crossing the sea, they usually think they're crossing this way. Right? They're crossing crossing right across this way. That's the big miracle. And the answer is they probably did not even come down on this side of Egypt. They probably were coming out this way, along this way, which would be where the Suez Canal is today, but where, of course, was a land bridge then, which is a land bridge, but it would just bifurcated it with the Suez Canal. There was no canal then; it was all dry land. So. Maybe I'll stay on this side here. It's not easier, okay? Because we can all be on the same map. Page 103. On the 103 side? 103. There you go, okay? So they probably would have come down. If you go down, you see where it says Midbar Shur. So we know about Midbar Shur. They're coming out to Midbar Shur. And then they go down to the right of the sea, where it says Mara and Elim. And then if they keep going down, that they get to Midbar Sin, and they have a question mark in Refidim, which is towards the bottom of Sinai. So that probably is where they would have walked along to the right of where the inlet of the Red Sea actually is.
Over here, no?
Over here. So where are they crossing the sea? So we don't really have a firm identity, but what we do believe, in fact, some of the early commentators talk about it, they probably entered the sea and came out the same side. In other words, it's not really crossing the sea. We don't talk it. In fact, the term that we use today, we don't even call it really Havaras Hayam or over Hayam. We call it Kriyat Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea. So what it looks like is they came on one side and they came back on the same side, somewhat like a circle, semicircle going through the sea.
But the Mitzrayim followed them.
Yes, the Mitzrayim followed them. They followed them, and they came in.
They came out.
So they came out, and before they came out, the sea came down.
You mean it wasn't the same route, like in out?
Yeah, sure, it was the same route, but the sea came down upon them. The sea splits, the sea opens up, but we always think of the sea opening up like a ferry goes across a bay. It may have opened up, the people came in, and they were going in this long crescent to go all the way around and come back the same side, which is one of the suggestions where they possibly had come from, or there are suggestions that they actually were on the other side, and they may have done the same thing. It's not really clear they necessarily crossed directly across. All they need to do to make this work is to get into the sea, right? They had no other choice, and then the Egyptians would follow. If I'm sounding something radical, let me know why you think it's wrong, because it may not be wrong. It may not be right, but it may not be wrong. We always have this idea, you have this picture, there's a sea, right? They're crossing Lake Ontario.
Yes, I'm picturing the movie. I'm picturing the sea and boom, right through.
They do go right through, but do they go as a straight line? But eventually they curve back. So don't think of this as going perhaps from Toronto to Rochester across the Lake Ontario. Think of this maybe as going from Toronto to Hamilton. Or Toronto to Burlington, not Burlington, probably Hamilton Harbor, which is really you're going on one side of the lake and coming back on the same side of the lake. Or entering in Toronto and coming back out at, let's say Kingston. You don't necessarily need to go all the way across. But based upon what we can identify where we believe certain of the locations are, and I guess they've done their research, they feel that Mara and Elim, which are places where they came to before they came to the sea itself, this is where there were trees and so forth, the water was bitter, which is on the east side of the Red Sea, would make it ridiculous to consider they would be going back, because first off, they went back, then how are they ever going to get to Sinai, which we know where Sinai is for sure. We know where Midbar Sinai is. That's where the Sinai Peninsula is today. So how could they go back? Unless we have the wrong location for where these places are, but it doesn't make sense that they would be on the right side. Or it doesn't make sense they'd be on the left side of the sea, where they would have come out of Eretz Goshen, which is more towards above where the Suez Canal is today. Okay, just in terms of trying to keep the reality of what's going on and what it is all about. It's really not about crossing the sea as much as getting away from Pharaoh.
Where's the information from, Moshe?
The information is trying to identify where these places were, where Eretz Goshen was.
Where is that from? Where's? I
guess people who have actually tried to study this. I didn't go that far into what the specific details are, but there's enough. I believe even someone as there are archaeologists in the universities who have suggested it's going in on the same side, coming out the same side.
But there's nothing in anything scripturally.
There's nothing in any scriptural that we can define where they would have come. There is, by the way, to kind of take the opposing opinion, you can't really see it here. You can see a little bit of it. If you look on the left side of the sea, you look at the left side of the sea as you go down towards the bottom of the map. All right, you see this looks like a scratchy part, a right next to it. What that is really is mountains, or it's really like a range. There's a very narrow strip between the mountains coming down and between the sea. So one of the suggestions has been they could have been actually crossing the sea further down, because if you got to that point further down, somewhere, let me just put my pen here, you can see somewhere around here, on this side, if they were there, they really had no way out. They were really cornered. They couldn't turn around, they couldn't go anywhere. They were on the beach, the only way they could go is into the sea. So that's the only thing that supports that side. But it's somewhat fanciful to suggest that they were all the way down on this side of the sea. Just doesn't make sense in terms of what we know about where things were inhabited, how they would have gone out, where they would possibly have traveled. What we can identify is where Egypt was actually developed and inhabited at that point.
Would the water level make a difference?
Would the water level have made a difference? Would mean like tides, for example, could have been... Yeah. Possibly it could have been less tides, but it's even when the tides pull back, it's very hard to imagine that it will be dry enough that people could walk across it without sinking into the mud.
What's the conjecture of a time frame of how long it took to cross?
The Bible says it at night. They did it in the night.
One night to cross.
Right, now we're going to come to an Ibn Ezra who makes a comment about that. Okay, because that sounds like a little fantastic. How could all these people cross the sea and enter one night and come out the other night? Now, if you're talking about crossing the sea, that's easy. It's even more fantastic. Because these are people going by foot. They'd have to cross all the way across the Gulf of Suez, which is possible, I suppose, but that sounds very difficult. But to go in, still, you've got these 600,000 people. They're not even 600,000 people. They're 600,000 males, right, from 20 to 60, which means it is probably approximately, the Ibn Ezra says it may be 4 times that amount. So you're talking about 2 million people who are going to go into the sea and come out the sea at the same time. Okay? Yes.
But the Mitzrayim
keep going after them.
Followed them.
Yes,
followed
they did.
them into the water.
Correct.
So, they must have gone very, very far into the sea then.
Yes, correct. They must have gone far into the sea, but they would still be visible from land that they were in the sea. It's almost like saying that you're on the beach, right? You can see down the beach, and you sometimes see boats down the beach. They're not that far out, but they're far from you.
Yeah.
So when the Egyptians come to the shore, they see these people who are in dry land who have walked into the sea, turned. I'm not sure if they turned right or left. It's not important, but they're far out, and yet the sea seems to be dry land for them to go through. By the way, if you were an Egyptian, would you consider going after the Jewish people, the Israelites, after having gone through the 10 plagues?
Me personally, no.
Me personally, no either. Pharaoh personally, why would Pharaoh go? Well, Pharaoh wanted to get back his slaves.
Yeah.
Right? And
I'm
sorry?
It was a machine for him.
He was a machine.
Was a machine.
Yes, it was a machine. And
a business machine.
True. But if you look, we're on page 368. Let's go into our Chumash now. If you look on 368, and Ramban, we're not going to do this Ramban, but the Ramban actually points out that that's why it's so critical in verse 4, where in verse 14:4 it says, God says that I'm going to harden the heart of Pharaoh and he will run after you. I will be fine, glorified through Pharaoh and his entire nation, and they'll know that I am Hashem. And later on it says, Vayachazek Hashem et lev Paro, God hardened Pharaoh's heart as well to follow the Jewish people into here, right at the bottom of verse 8. The same page, Vayachazek Hashem et lev Paro, God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he ran after the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are going into the sea. Okay? So they're traveling away, and this is actually before the sea. So that Pharaoh went because God hardened his heart. Now this hardening of the heart is taking away Pharaoh's free will. But you may remember the Ramban had suggested at one point, we did it did we do it this week? We did it last week, I can't remember anymore. That taking away Pharaoh's free will was part of the punishment. First of all, he didn't take away the free will at the beginning. And when he does take away the free will, Pharaohs have gone through 5 of the plagues. And the other suggestion of the Ramban is, part of the punishment is taking away your free will. Denying you free will is probably one of the worst punishments that you have, to do something someone has made a decision for you to do, that you can make your own decision. Okay, so at any rate, Pharaoh follows after them, and that may be the miracle of the whole story, is that Pharaoh decides not to let them go after having been roundly and soundly defeated by the Almighty, but chases after them. Okay? And what happens in the beginning of verse 8, so God hardens Pharaoh's heart, they run after the Israelites, the people are going out with an upraised arm, that's referring to like pride, very proud, very strong, very uplifted. The Mitzrayim chase after them, and they finally catch up with the Jewish people, and they're standing against the sea, at the sea. Who's there? All the chariots of Pharaoh, all his chariot people, next to Piachirot, which is before Baal Tzifon. Baal Tzifon was a big idol that was there, that identified like saying, meet me at the Catholic Church. Meet me at the Unitarian Church on the corner. You're identifying it by a well-known kind of idol. Paro comes closer. Jewish people see that Pharaoh is chasing after them. They are very afraid. Vaitzuk b'nei Yisrael Hashem, and the people cry out to Hashem in verse 10. And they say to Moshe, is there no graves in Egypt to bury us there? Why did you take us here to run away from Egypt? Because, this is what we told to you. And Mitzrayim said, leave us alone, we'll serve Egypt. Because kitov lana avod Mitzrayim, it's better to be servants and slaves than to die in the wilderness. Moshe says, don't worry. Al-Tiro, Hityatzvu, Ruat Hashem. You will stand by or stand up and you'll see the saving from Hashem. Asher Yaselachem Hayom, what he does to you. Ki Asher Yisem Etzvayim Hayom, Lo Tasifun Liratom Od Alalom. But you'll see the Egypt, where you see Egypt today, you won't see them again. Hashem Yilachem Lachem V'yatem Tachvishun. God is going to fight for you and you will be able to Tachvishun, you shall remain silent. You don't have to do anything there. So what's Moshe's response? What does Moshe say to the people?
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. God will look after you. God's going to play the whole show out. You guys will just be the spectators. You'll watch the show and God will do it all.
Easier said.
It's easier said, but then of course this happens.
Were these people wrong, Moshe?
To be afraid of the Egyptians?
No, to say what they said? Going back to being slaves?
Well, hold on to the question, okay?
Slave mentality.
Right, hold on to the question. Hold on to the question because we're going to see it directly in one moment in the Ibn Ezra. Before I do the Ibn Ezra with you, just want to do one more verse and you'll tell me what you think. So you've had the give and take between Moshe and the people. People said, what'd you take us here for? They cry out to, who do the people cry out to? They cry out to Hashem. And then they say to Moshe, what'd you take us here for? Why didn't you, we could have died in Egypt instead of coming all the way to the sea and die at the sea. Would have been better there to say slaves rather than to die here. And Moshe says, don't worry, everything is after. What is next? What happens in verse 15? After Moshe reassures the people that everything is okay, what does Moshe do?
Goes to Hashem.
Goes to Hashem. And no, he doesn't go to Hashem. Hashem comes to Moshe.
Oh yeah, right. He asked.
Hashem comes to Moshe, and what does Hashem say to Moshe?
Why are you coming to me?
Matzitzak Elai. Right? Go speak to the people and they should travel. Now I got a question for you. Where does it say that Moshe was crying out to Hashem? Everything that I read until verse 15 said the people were crying out to Moshe, and Moshe said, cool it, don't worry guys, everything's okay. Where does Moshe cry out to Hashem? Doesn't say.
No.
So once again, we're not doing Ramban today, but if we were doing Ramban would have said, Ramban does say, gives two suggestions. One is that when God says to Moshe, why are you crying out to me? Moshe is in place of the Jewish people. Why you, your people? Why you, the leader of these people, why are they crying out to me? Okay, that's one suggestion of the Ramban. You're the rep, you're more than the rep, you're the leader, you're the man, right? I speak to you and you speak to the people. So my speaking to you is like Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Leim, where God spoke to Moses saying, say over to the people. So God speaks to Moses saying, why are you crying? Well, you means you it's written as singular, but it means you as a representative of the people. That's one approach the Ramban says. Second approach the Ramban says, and this is a very unique approach, it does make sense, that what the Almighty is saying to that Moshe actually prays to God. What would you do if you were Moshe? You can reassure the people, but you're the religious leader. What would a priest do? What would a rabbi do? Forget a priest. What would a rabbi do? Joke, a rabbi and a priest doing all these jokes. What would a rabbi do? What would the Talmud Chacham do? What would a tzaddik do? Their face, say Tehillim, right? So it looks like that Moshe tells the people, don't worry, God will look after, but Moshe himself begins praying to Hashem. Because Moshe doesn't know what to do. In other words, Moshe speaks to the people, says God will look after. And that may be a good answer, that God will look after, but you still got to pray to Hashem for God to look after. So the Ramban conjectures that maybe Moshe began praying to Hashem. That's the only answer he had what to do. And Hashem says to Moshe, stop praying. There's not time for prayer. What are you going to do? Tell the people, and you should travel ahead. Raise your hand, raise your staff, raise your hand, raise your staff, and the sea will split, and you go through the dry land.
What's troubling there, Moshe, is that there are other times Moshe prays to Hashem and it's all fine. And Hashem could have said, we learned this recently, I forget where, and Hashem could have said, why are you praying to me? But here he says to Moshe, why are you praying to me?
Why are you praying to me? Travel.
Okay, action. But there are other times Moshe prays to him. Why does he need to pray to him for something else?
Right, so why
he allows it.
Correct,
Hashem allows it.
Excellent question. Why is this a different case than all the other cases of Moshe prays? I don't know. The answer is that maybe Moshe here, this was the first time that Moshe really experienced what was probably the other panic. He didn't know what to do either. So rather than do nothing, he prays. But the more important point is it doesn't say that in Scripture. The Torah doesn't say that. Dan, question, comment?
I have a question. We passed this. There's here this. They ask why aren't there enough graves in Mitzrayim? So that's held as a first or one of the first jokes or humor, right? How can they?
Yeah, they're being
cynical.
It's
humor. They're being facetious with Hashem, with Moses.
But how come they have the? How can they talk like that when they're under pressure and they're really scared? Wow. The two things don't stem.
What do you mean?
Why
under pressure? The Egyptians are on them. Okay. Really, you find it.
So I
don't. To be.
Can I tell you something? I was thinking about this 2 minutes ago. I was thinking about this, Dan. Think about this. The human species cares about one thing: survival. Hashem doesn't matter. You care to survive. They are so scared here. They want to live, and they'd rather be a slave and live. And that's life, isn't it?
But the
life?
literature holds this as one of the major humor things that were said.
Does it?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
I saw it.
They're being sarcastic.
They're sarcastic. But it's humor. Humor has different.
I'm not sure. I'll tell you how I read it.
Right. So you would care to stick it like
they're
that
being
in this situation.
Yeah.
Egyptians are.
He's not wrong. They are being sarcastic.
I see Moshe putting them in this situation. They're pretty upset at Moshe. So they're
right. So you're not upset. You find time to be sarcastic.
I will read it back to you that it's not
for your life.
I'll read it back to you that I don't think it's sarcastic. One of the important values that every culture has is that the people when they die are buried. Right? Sometimes they worship the dead, sometimes they venerate the dead, but the whole concept of burying, of having a burial ground, goes back to Avram and Sarah and so forth. So one of the worst things to happen is the body is not recovered. The body does not have a resting place. It's not by chance that the Nazis cremated or the Nazis created mass graves. It's not just an efficiency, but the ultimate desecration of life is desecrating the dead. And not having a body and not giving the body the proper kavod is seen very negatively. So I think
it's not sarcasm.
So I'm saying what they're saying to Moshe is we're going to die here with nobody will look after us. We're going to be thrown into the ocean. Our bodies will rot at the sea. right? Would have been better if we would have been buried in Egypt with a proper grave.
If you Google humor in the Torah, you'll see first maybe Shem Mashomera Chi Anochi.
Yeah, I don't.
Also said,
But
I'm not sure that I don't view this as humor.
Masha, you just said something. So hold on here. Yes, but we talk about graves, all this kind of stuff from the Torah, right?
Yes.
There wasn't the Torah then. What did they know from
They
graves?
had traditions. What they knew about the ancestors. Right? We actually know, in fact, what we do know, and we actually read it in the opening stitch of the Parsha, is Moshe takes the bones of Joseph.
Right.
They're venerating Joseph to rebury him into Israel, wherever they go. So there's a concept of ensuring that there's proper burial rites. However the burial rites are done, every culture has, including the Jewish people, and they see they're taking out their famous ancestor, Joseph, who was the one who got him into Egypt. They're carrying the bones out. He had requested this. That's how important burial is. Bury me back in Israel.
yes,
He doesn't ask me.
You're interpreting this literally then. They're
Yeah,
saying it literally,
that's how I read it. That's how I read it. Anyways,
Yep.
so this is kind of the milieu that we're going to take a look at. So I copied a page from the Ibn Ezra. It does not have a translation. It does not have dots, but it's broken up that you can read it easily. Okay, we're going to do two pieces of the Ibn Ezra. One part, the first part, what we're going to read in this Ibn Ezra, you'll say, of course, that's a simple meaning, but I think you'll come to the end of it, you'll see that the Ibn Ezra adds something significant. Okay, so Moshe says to the people in verse 13, this is the top piece, says Yudalad Yud Gimel. Okay, stand and you'll see the saving of God. But Moses says to the people, just stand back and watch the show. God is going to look after everything. So says the Ibn Ezra, Hitjatvu Ruat Yeshuat Hashem. First line. Second line, Ki atem lo tasu milchama. You won't do any battle. Rak shetiruat Yeshuat Hashem asher yaseh lechem hayom. You see how God saves you. So the Ibn Ezra asked the question. It's the obvious question. You know the answer already. Yesh l'tmoa. Ech yira machaneh gadol sheshesh meot elef ish me'arodfim achreim. How could 600,000 warriors, 600,000 people from the age of 20 to 60, how could they be afraid of the people who are running after them? They outnumber them. Why did they not say to Moses, let's go fight these people? And the obvious answer is, what's the obvious answer? You don't need the Ibn Ezra to tell you.
Slaves.
The slave mentality. They had no idea what their slave mentality, and second of all, these are the masters. Tshuva says the Ibn Ezra, that the Egyptians were the masters of the Jewish people, the Israelites. And this generation that came out of Egypt learned from its youth, they learned to suffer the burden of Egypt and to have a low, not humble, but a low put down sense of negative identity. And therefore, how can they possibly consider fighting against the Egyptians who are running after them with these armed chariots? So that's the simple part. Now the Ibn Ezra adds a kind of tweak to this. The Jewish people were weak, were stubborn, I should say, but were not taught how to fight battle. They were not trained. And says the Ibn Ezra, I'll even show this to you. When the Amalekites attacked them, which we looked at on Tuesday at the end of the parsha, so the Amalekites we said are this fierce tribe, and that's how the Ramban said they were. Ibn Ezra says, you know what? This was a band of warriors, but they weren't that large. They weren't that large. So v'lulei tfilat Moshe, if not for the prayer of Moshe, the Amalekites would have weakened the Jewish people. Now, and as a result, the only reason that they were successful against the Amalekites was Moses' prayer. God came to save them. But the Amalekites were clearly outnumbered. How could the Amalekites attack them? Because the Jewish people were not trained in war. They still had the slave mentality. That's simple, and no questions asked. Now, you have a question.
Yes.
I said no questions asked. Go ahead.
No questions to ask?
No, you can ask, yes.
Okay, so Bnei Israel had the slave mentality.
Right.
But the Egyptians were attacking. What were they thinking? They were suicidal. Do you think that they had no chance against 600,000?
So they had no courage. That's correct. They had no courage. They had no courage. They had no mental courage to stand up against the Egyptians.
And the Egyptians knew that?
The Egyptians probably knew that. The Egyptians, or maybe Pharaoh, expected that.
There was a psychological point here.
They had chariots, I think. That's what they were counting on. They knew that it was the chariots.
The chariots raise you higher than the people on the ground.
Egyptians were confident.
Right.
The Hebrews were not confident.
The chariot,
Doesn't matter how many they are.
The chariots are the equivalent of the
Tanks.
rapid tanks. Correct. Not even more rapid than the tanks are today. The rapid attack force.
Right.
The jigs.
Egyptians were trained at war.
Correct.
Right.
They were the largest, they were the greatest country in the world.
Right.
But
But
here's what the Ibn Ezra is trying to say. The Ibn Ezra is suggesting, you may want to say this is right or wrong. The Ibn Ezra is suggesting it wasn't the fact that just the Egyptians were trained warriors, just the Jewish people were not able to be warriors. The Jewish people were not able to fight back, not only in numbers, but they had the slave mentality. They couldn't turn it around that quickly. Okay, so that does this make sense so far? So listen what the Ibn Ezra now says. The Ibn Ezra says, so when are you going to change the slave mentality? How do you get out of this? It didn't happen at the sea. Sorry? So you would say when you see the masses split down, so the moment they left the sea and the Egyptians were drowned, and that was it, they were free, they broke out of the yoke. But the Ibn Ezra says it's not true. Because after the Egyptians are drowned, they still meet Amalek, and they're terrified to fight Amalek. Now Moshe does have Joshua put together some sorties, some group of soldiers to go fight, but they look like they do a really poor job, unless if he raised his hands and prayed to God and tefillah happened, and the Almighty said, I'm going to come, I helped to rain down.
Meraglim was the same thing. They were afraid.
Right. So when does the change actually happen? When do they break out of the slave mentality? Sorry? Har Sinai? No, because the Meraglim were after Har Sinai.
But by Amalek, we are not told that they are complaining.
They're not complaining, and they're not complaining. It's a reality of just what the facts are on the ground. They don't have the ability to change. They can't break out of the slave mentality.
To war, no problem.
There was no problem?
No qualms to go to war.
They had no problems to follow God, but they were not able to defend themselves. Why are they not able to defend themselves? The Ibn Ezra is suggesting not because they were outnumbered, but because they didn't have the mentality, they had this slave mentality that they couldn't turn around. So how do you get out of the slave mentality?
Have all this slave mentality people die.
Right. So the Ibn Ezra says...
That's why they never entered Israel.
So the Ibn Ezra says, and this is the tweak on the story of the Bible that you really is not said, because we read the Bible, they should have gone directly into Israel. Right? The way it would have been, they came out of Egypt, they crossed the sea, they came to Sinai, they should have built the tabernacle, they made the golden calf, they have to build the tabernacle, it takes them a couple months to put a tabernacle, get the tabernacle together. The second year, they should have gone right in. Why didn't they go in? They started complaining, there was spies, Korah, yada, yada, yada. They're going to wander for 40 years. But the truth is, says the Ibn Ezra, that the Almighty knew this was going to happen. And God has this infinite wisdom to recognize that if the Jewish people are going to go into Israel and forge their own independent country, and they're going to fight against Canaanites and other peoples that are there, Plishtim and so forth, they can't be the generation that came out. The generation that came out doesn't sound fair. It's not fair, you say, but that's not free will. You're not giving them the full opportunity. You're saying them that they'll never really be free, and the answer is yes, they'll never be free. They can have an opportunity to reach so high, they can be spiritually free, but they can never change the slave mentality that they grew up with in Egypt. They got to wait for the generation that's born free. In the same way that what made Moshe the leader of the Jewish people, that he was not born free, but he was raised free. He had that vision of being born and being raised as in the nobility, the prince of Egypt, being raised in that kind of society.
There was a new generation that went into the Meraglim that went into Israel. And they still, wasn't it a new generation?
No, it was
not. They all die out.
Not yet. Not yet. That's the decision. God's declaration that they will all die in the wilderness happens in hindsight after the Meraglim.
Okay.
So the Meraglim is the second year. They're all sending people who've come out of Egypt. And God says the Meraglim will die, and you will be wandering the wilderness for 40 years, and the next generation will go in. This all is the effect of the Meraglim. This is the end of the Meraglim story. And the people are very upset about it, because now they can't go into Israel. But the reality is this is for their benefit. So it says the Ibn Ezra, really, sometimes God does things that you don't understand why it's being done, or it looks like it's for reason A when it's really for reason B.
This is maybe a digression, but it makes me think of Ramban Smecha.
Yeah.
That the Jews so all the Jews leave Europe who went through the Holocaust and they land in Eretz Israel, where they themselves, without the the Chalatzim, who were non-slave people and were the leaders of the resistance, would they have been able to survive? Like if you'd just taken a bunch of
Holocaust survivors,
Jews, would they have been able to withstand it?
Well, they actually did. They did come. Post-Holocaust Jews did come to Israel.
They did, but they had the leadership of a group of people who were there before that.
So the truth is, the leadership were people who came out of Europe too. The original leadership.
Before the Holocaust.
Yes, but they came out of persecutions from Europe in many cases.
Right, but they had like a period of time.
Correct. So what you really want to know, if everybody went to Israel, could it happen like that? Mashiach would come, or would we have to wait a generation? I don't know. It's a good question, super question. Let's go back and see this Ibn Ezra. Just read it together. So this begins. This is this first paragraph that we have, and I'm going to begin on that 4 lines from the end. V'Hashem levado. Hu shoseh gedolot. God alone does great things. V'lo nitknu alilut, and only God can really plan it. So Him is the initial planning. Sibev, He switched it around, or He tweaked it. Shemeitu kolam hayotzei mimitzrayim hazacharim. He made it happen. Didn't really make it happen because we had free will, and the spies could have come back with a positive report. But He set it up the system that the males who came out of Egypt, the virile males, the age of serving in the army, would die in what would happen to them? They would die in the wilderness. They don't have the power. They don't have the strength to fight the Knanim. Until the generation after the wilderness came, who didn't see exile, were not in Egypt. They had a expanded kind of soul. That means they tasted freedom. As he says, I explained to you later on, he explained it earlier in the Sefer Shemot itself. Okay, one more Ramban, and I'm going to take it to one more Ibn Ezra. I keep saying Ramban. The next one here, this is where the Ibn Ezra talks about the fact that it looks like that the Egyptians and the Hebrews were very close, and how could they do it all in one night? So it says in verse 29, we didn't see the verse inside the Chumash, but the Chumash is going to tell us that the Jewish people came in verse 29. The Jewish people came in the where it was dry, in the middle of the sea. The waters were a wall on them on the right and the left. So the Bible used the term that the Jewish people came in the dry land in the middle of the sea. And who follows them? The Egyptians follow them, which is really what the story is going on. So it mentions it again, even though it had mentioned it before, that the Jewish people were going to came into the sea when it was if you go back to verse number 22, I guess I kind of did this out of order. Verse 22 is the same sense as verse 29. So the Jewish people came into the sea in the dry land, and the water were for them a wall between them to the right and to the left. And then it says again in 29 that the Jewish people are going in the sea. So why does it mention it twice? So what happens between verse 22 and verse 29? What happens between verse 22 where the Jewish people go into the sea on the dry land, and verse 29 where it says the Jewish people were in the sea on the dry land, or the dry land in the sea?
The water came back.
The Egyptians followed them, and the water came down. So here's what the Ibn Ezra is reflecting upon. In verse 22, before the Egyptians get drowned, then the Jews are in the dry land in the middle of the sea. The Egyptians go and get drowned, and what does verse 29 say? The Jews are in this dry land in the middle of the sea. So where are the Jews when the Egyptians are being drowned? They're still in the water. They haven't gotten out of the pool yet. So in other words, the Egyptians are being drowned as the Israelites are going there. I think that's what you really see, like in the movie, right? The Israelites are up ahead, and the water begins closing down on the Egyptians, right?
Where's the story of one of the men goes into the water and it goes right up to his chin? There's a
Nachshon ben Aminadab. This is he. Yes, it's actually based upon verse 22 where it says they go into the sea in the dry land. First they had to jump into the sea, and then it became dry land. They actually had to make the first step. Someone had to do something, not just rely upon God. Great, thanks, Jeff. That's Nachshon ben Aminadab, the leader of the tribe of Yehuda. So let's do this. Let's do the Ibn Ezra. So the Ibn Ezra just reflects upon the fact that this miracle that occurred. The miracle that occurs is very close. The Egyptians and the Hebrews are very close to each other in the same pool, in the same body of water. So Tam Laskir Zepamacher, this is the one in the middle. The reason here, this piece here, Tam Laskir The reason to mention that it says twice in verse 22 and verse 29 that the Jewish people are traveling in the dry land in the middle of the sea, Ki Paro haya toveya, that Pharaoh is being drowned, V'yod neshur Yisrael od yeshur anashim Yisrael b'yam ovrim, and still were Israelites in the sea. V'zeh haya pela b'toch pela. This was a miracle, a wonder inside a wonder. Why? Ki b'makom shal Yisrael ovrim b'yam, because when, as the Jewish people were going through the sea, Hayasham Ruach Kadim Yabesh. So the Bible told us that the east wind came and dried out the sea. So there's an east wind blowing. Uvamakom sheparo v'chilo hevi shama paro v'chilo hevi Hashem Ruach Acheret lamei samayim shnikvushu v'natzachamot. God brings the other wind going the other way. If you read the story, the narrative, we don't have time to do it. God lets the wind blow one way, dries out the land. The Egyptians come through, God has the wind blow the other way. You've got opposing winds while they're in the same area within the sea. In one area, very close to each other, the wind is coming from the east, and the other way it's going to the west.
Could it be a tide?
Could be anything you want. It could be a tide. But it talks about a wind.
But it sounds like a tide.
It sounds like it could be a tide, but it's a very quick kind of tide, like the Bay of Fundy.
Okay.
It's got to be, right. There's no reason to say that the miracles were not related somehow to nature.
Yeah.
Remember, all the plagues are natural phenomena, just magnified. Exactly. So if you can imagine the Bay of Fundy kind of change of the tides, where you go from dry land, you can walk there, and suddenly you come back, and 12 hours later you take your canoe. So this could be the same kind of concept, except that the land does not dry out that quick for 600,000 people to go over. So there are two kinds of winds, two opposing winds in the sea, and the people are very close. And if you read the Yaz Yashir poem that reads across, it says, one pasuk says that with the strength of your breath of your wind, you kind of had the sea dry out, which is the wind that blew against Israel. And then it says in two psukim later, the Ruach came along and covered them over. This was where the Egyptians were covered. Winds are going in both ways, and therefore it says in the pasuk, in the end of the Shira, Vayashav alhem et me'ayam, uvnei Yisrael lechu b'yabasha b'toch yam. In the very end of the actual Az Yashir song that they sing, it says it again, that the Jewish people went through the Yam. Right? God brought down the Yam on the Egyptians, and the Jewish people are still going through the sea. It's happening at the same time. Okay, final piece. This is 4 lines before the end of this piece. V'yalta tamah. Now says the Ibn Ezra. Okay, so you got 600,000 people going into the sea. This sounds somewhat miraculous. V'yalta tamah echlu yichlu lavar kol halayla. How is it possible that they went the entire night and they got through the sea in one night? V'chi 600,000 ragli lo haya raviyat hamachneh. 600,000 males in 2060 were not even about a quarter of the camp. Ulai al derech acher avaru. So the Ibn Ezra suggests maybe there were multiple paths. Maybe they had, because of course this is a religious camp, you got a path for men, a path for women, a path for children. You got different lines.
Different path for each.
Yes, and he says that. Oh, Nikra liyad beit Kroim, well, there were 12 different breaks in the sea. Nowhere does it say that they're going single file. There'd be multiple ways that the sea could split. You don't have to really look at the movie picture where you see the Jewish people going in a narrow path, and the chariots are going down in the two chariot path. It could be that they were very, very wide, or very multiple ways which they went through. As Chazal actually said, every tribe had their own path. So then every tribe has their own path, and you got 12 tribes, you can do it 12 times as quick. Right? Yisrael over Ayam. Now here's and also says the Ibn Ezra, and here's what I told you before about where they went in. This is the Ibn Ezra suggesting and conjecturing. Yisrael over Ayam keneged arochav, and the Jewish people didn't cross the entire sea in the width, like to go across the entire the Gulf of Suez or the Red Sea. Rak nichlasu bi'orech v'yatzu el midbar shur. They came out, they went the long way, and they came out towards midbar shur. Asher nichlasu misham kashafresh. As he will explain later on, that they went down to midbar shur. That was also part of where their traveling was. So they're really traveling along, and they're going south on the same side of what the exit is. So, do they have a picture of Midbar Shur here in this picture? I know they have it on one of them. On the other side, on page 119, they have Midbar Shur. They have it on both, on 103. So there are different Midbaros we think of this all one big desert, but different locations had different we call different things. The part towards the top over here is called Midbar Shur. Okay, this is Midbar Shur. To the right of Midbar Shur is Midbar Tzin, which they only get to at the very end of the 40 years. If you keep going down all the way down towards the bottom, you have Midbar Sinai. So the Midbar Shur is to the east side, to the right side of where the sea is, which means they came in. We don't know exactly where, but they came in and they came out somewhere where Midbar Shur is, which is, once again, I told you, they would have come in this way, would have gone out of Egypt, gone in here, Midbar Shur somewhere, come out, and continued on going down. So that's what the Ibn Ezra says. Now, depending on how far that would be, you could actually bring across all those people as long or as short as the distance they would take. So you can adjust that based upon what you think would be reasonable for 600,000 or 2 million people coming across in 12 different paths at the same time.
2 questions.
Yeah.
Chazal say the 12 tribes had their own paths.
Yes.
Where's that from?
Where's that
Where do
from?
they get that information?
So the Medrash has a lot of hyperbole about all the miracles that took place in the crossing of the sea. Which is based upon, to some extent, a lot of hypothesis and hyperbole. And Medrash likes to kind of make good things become even better. So the Medrash has, for example, that every tribe had their own separate path. They were unique because the Jewish people are going to be divided according to tribes. The Medrash has that there were wells of water that popped out of the sea. There was potable water. There were trees that came up.
How do they, from where?
Where do they make it from?
Yeah, no.
They suggest it.
Where does Chazal get that? Where are they going to analyze? Like, where's it from? Where's the information
I'll tell you where it's from. It's from something you say in the Haggadah. That towards the end of the Haggadah, right before Dayenu or right after Dayenu. It's right after Dayenu. They talk about God, the finger of God and the hand of God. And in Mitzrayim, the Chartumim said, Etzba Elokim Hi, it's the finger of God. And at the sea, it talks about the Yad HaChazaka, the hand of God. Now, a hand is 5 times as many as a finger. Hand has 5 fingers. And then the Medrash says, well, how many miracles took place in Egypt? Whatever the amount of miracles that took place in Egypt, 5 times the amount of miracles took place in the sea. So if there were 10 plagues in Egypt equals 1 finger, then the 10 miracles in Egypt, which is 10 plagues in Egypt, then at the sea there had to be 5 times as many, which is going to be 50, because this is a finger and this is a hand. That's how the Medrash says it. And based upon that, the Medrash begins conjecturing, how could there have been 50 miracles? We know 1 miracle splits in half. Maybe a great miracle, still 1 miracle. They begin conjecturing all different multiple kinds of miracles, including it wasn't 1 path, it was 12 paths, including the trees that pop up, including the water. So this is in line with how Medrash kind of creates hyperbole and tries to develop things based upon the concept that they feel within the Torah this was a greater miracle. And that's based upon the comparison of finger to a hand.
Right.
Okay? That's a finger.
If I may add.
Yes.
The math will indicate the need to come up with this, because if you put 3 million people in a straight line, let's say you put 2 people per meter, right? You get 1.5 million meters, which is 1,500 kilometers. Right? They couldn't possibly do that in one night. So you see the need. Now dividing that into 12 doesn't make it much better, because you still have to go more than 100 kilometers in one night, right? But you see the Midrash sees the need to explain something, to change the picture.
There's a process of deduction there, I understand.
Because Midrash always has, they come with, because there's a need in the text.
So the tide goes out for miles and miles and miles and miles. So I can imagine that would be...
The tide yes.
The tide. And because this is by itself, it could be that there's a different...
Right, and you also have to remember it's...
there's no Suez Canal in here.
Well, there is no Suez Canal. Suez Canal is up here.
So the tide here could have been totally
lower.
Different.
Right.
Lower.
Where is the crossing here?
Where in this picture?
What do they suggest to the crossing?
So what I've been saying is they're suggesting the crossing is like this.
Yeah, but where? Which part?
Somewhere here is a strip. They would come in.
They don't indicate it.
No, in this one they don't. They don't. Neither of them do they. Correct. I'm sorry. I tried. The Xerox didn't. I realized it actually didn't write it in because they don't know exactly. Yes.
Is this Ibn Ezra's Kiddush about
the Ibn Ezra says it. The Tosfot actually, Tosfot Masechet Erchin suggests it.
Could it be
So this is
that-
already.
So much sense.
This is really a conjecture that goes back to the Middle Ages.
know if it's replicable this sea.
The earliest we have recorded.
We don't know if
Tiskuni
it's
says the same thing.
for sure.
So, but because everybody tries to conjecture what is going on here. Right? Where did they cross, and why did they have to cross? Why would they be so foolish enough to try to cross the sea? Why would you take a route out of Egypt that end you up in a dead end? So the answer is they didn't. They just were along the coast, and suddenly the Egyptians are against them. They got no place to go. Even they keep walking along the coast, the Egyptians will catch up with them. So what do? They turn to the sea. Sea splits. They enter into it. It's a great answer. The Egyptians chase them. They get drowned.
Is Moshe aware that it's going to take 40 years?
Is Moshe aware at this point? No, I don't believe
Is
so.
he ever aware
Is he ever aware when he?
about the journey and
Well, I think
delay?
he's aware of the journey when everybody.
it's going to be a 40-year journey?
Before-
Or is he in the dark like everyone else?
I think he's in the dark like everybody else. Right, and what's more important, he's in the dark. He's not going to go into Israel until that happens at the very end. That's probably the biggest kind of push against Moshe, right? But all I'm saying, the key to the Ibn Ezra is, as much as we look at the fact that they were in the wilderness for 40 years, the truth is what the Ibn Ezra is saying. This was actually the plan of God to make it work. If they had not been in the desert for 40 years, they could not have actually been successful going to Israel. Okay, we got time to do a Mesilas Shalom. What do you say? I think so. We'll make it work. Always time to Mesilas Shalom. Okay, so what happens? This is the first page you have. Everybody's got one? Philip has one? Okay, so this is Mesilas Shalom. Of course, the Slender Rebbe is going to make a suggestion based upon what actually takes place. What's the significance of reading about the Oz Yasher? Jewish people come across the sea. They see the hand of God. Vayar Yisrael et Yad HaGdol Asher Asa Hashem Mitzrayim. Vayiru et Hashem Vayaminu Hashem of Moshe Avdo. I probably should be quoting you that pasuk from the Torah itself, and that's the pasuk right before they sing the Oz Yasher, which is right. It's in the end of chapter 14, the last pasuk. The Jewish people saw the great hand that Hashem had inflicted upon Egypt. The people revered Hashem. They were afraid of Hashem. Vayaminu Hashem. They had faith in God and faith in Moshe, his servant. So the Slumber Rebbe has a couple of questions. That's the pasuk in the end of chapter 14. I will just translate again. The people saw the great hand of God that He did to Egypt. Remember the hand and the finger. They were afraid of Hashem, or feared Hashem, were in awe of Hashem. Probably a better term. They believed in Hashem and they believed in Moshe's servant. So he says a lot of questions he has about this pasuk. First of all, it says Vayar Yisrael Se'ag Dolah. Why does it say God's great hand? It could have said really Yad Chazakah, the strong arm. What's this great hand? Great is Chazakah is really about Gevura, is about power. Gedolah is great, can be great for a lot of things. Great can be great in giving chesed. Chazak, you're looking at God as a warrior here at the sea. So what would you want to say? The Jewish people should have said they saw Vayar Yisrael Se'yad HaChazaka, the strong arm of God, not the great arm of God, not the great helpful arm of God. So what's Yad Chazaka? Second question is, it says V'kein yesh l'shol or yesh lamar omro Vayar Yisrael Vayiram Hashem Vayaminu Hashem of Moshe Avdo. Why did it say the people feared God and they believed in Hashem? What do you mean they had emunah in Hashem? What emunah? They saw it. What does emunah mean to you? How do you translate emunah, trust or belief? I don't see Hashem, and I believe that Hashem is there. Isn't that what emunah really is? I trust if I do this, this will happen. If I see it, right? You don't have to. This is not about belief. This is about seeing. As we say, seeing is believing, but it's seeing. So once they see the great arm of God, they see what the power of God. What do they need emunah? Hello, emunah. You don't see that. Some more you have to ask. What does it say of the lamanerakan inyan yira? What are they afraid of? And should they love God? Afraid of God? They see the power of God helping them. That's the greatest love you can see that God has for them. It's better to talk about love of the Jewish people for God, love of God for the Jewish people. By seeing the strong arm of God destroy the Jewish people, they should love Hashem completely. Love does not mean physical love. It's not sexual love. It's about creating a very close bond of connection with God. That's what love really is. This type of love to Hashem. Dvail, that it says, he says, if you look through the story about the Kriyat Yamsuf, many times it refers to the Jewish people in the Song of the Sea as children. It says, Hama, we say in the davening, Hama v'rbanav bein Gizrei Yamsuf. He took his children through the Gizrei Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea, the sides of the sea. It says, Malchuscha ra'u banecha. This is from Marav Tfilah. Your kingdom, your children saw. Ki bekriyat Yamsuf, that's the abbreviation, Nitgaled Yisrael godet avad HaKadosh Baruch Hu tam. When it talks about us as children to God, it's like a father loves children. We're fearing a father, but we love a father. Shlozu b'vad she'itzilam me'ad Mitzrayim, ela af gila lahem chavivot yitera b'chol ha'partim shel Kriyat Yamsuf. They didn't just fear God, God just didn't save them, but God showed His love to them, as we have in all the miracles that we were just talking about a moment ago, Jeff and I. Kinita b'chazal, kol ha'nisim shnasu lehem. According to the Medrash hyperbole, God did all kinds of wonders for them. Shel chol shevet nazah shvil b'fnei atzmam. Every tribe had their own path. Minaktalim navu lahem mayim mitukim. There were wells of water or springs of water came out from the sides of the sea. Shemikol zero Yisrael sheinam rak b'chinat avadim elabanim him lamakom. The Jewish people saw that this was a God who looked after them, who takes care of them, who looks after them like a father. So why are we called that we're afraid of God? So why does it talk about Emunah? What does it talk about? What kind of place of Emunah is there? What is it about fearing God? Why are we not loving God? We saw the greatness of God's love to us, and therefore, why does it say, why does it say God, they were afraid and awe of Hashem? And the same thing it says, they believed in Hashem and Moshe's servant. Why are we putting Hashem and Moshe together? It should have been two things. There are two types of Emunah. There should be Emunah b'Hashem Yitbarach. You trust in Hashem, and then you have Emunah b'Moshe Avdo, trust in Moshe. How can you say they trusted in Hashem and in Moshe? So what's going on here? So he says as follows: the key to the Yoshia, the key to the sea, is not just the fact that the miracle occurred, but the miracle occurred and brought them to the first time anyone actually sang praise to Hashem. There is no other place in the Torah until now, in the Psukim, I hope, okay? There's no other place where you find a person praising God or giving shira, ultimate singing of praise to the Almighty until this point. People recognize God, people understand God, people appreciate God, but no one sings shira. Shira is the ultimate praise, complete ecstatic praise to Hashem until this point. V'yesh lomar, and this is really what he's going to explain, and of course the application to us who can praise God. Ha'inyan bekteim, we can explain as follows: Ma'isa b'medrash, but the medrash says, Miyom shibara kadosh baruch hu et olam, from the time that God made the world, v'ad shamdu Yisrael al hayam, until the Jewish people stood on the edge of the sea. Lo matzino adam shomer shira la kadosh baruch hu Yisrael. No one sang praise to Hashem except the Jewish people at this point. And the medrash goes through all the people until now, all the great heroes until now. Adam Harishon, that's the abbreviation. Avot, the patriarchs, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which miracles were done for them. Shnasu lahem nisim, v'lo mushira. Until Kevan Sheba Yisrael Yam v'nikra lahem miyad mushira. Until they came to the sea split in half. They sang Shira l'fnei Kadosh Baruch Hu Shneimar Az Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael. So this is, they were able to sing praise at that point. Why didn't the other people sing Shira until then? Umadua lo amru kol elo shira mishum dinyana shira kasher. What is Shira all about? Kasher ro'ima tegilui hagadol. When you see God's eminence, when you see God's visibility, when you see God's power clearly and completely, shehol kol hanagata borehu achtov v'chesed. That everything that God does is good. Praise is not about a singular event or single event. Praise is about recognition that the whole process was good, and this is the highlight of all the good that occurred. They suddenly realized when they stood at the edge of the sea. Now this is something that you're going to reflect with me in a moment, whether you think this is really 100% correct. When they stood at the edge of the sea and they saw the miracles of the Egyptians drowning, they realized everything that happened until that point was for good, even all the troubles they had in Egypt. The troubles were only a way, were only a utensil, were only a pipe to get to see the ultimate good of the Almighty. In other words, if you stopped at the end of the plagues or the middle of the plagues, you say what's going on. You stop before the plagues, the Jewish people would say, what are we here for? But the moment they got out and they came to the end of this, you realize the story of life is all about waiting to see God's actual presentation of what the story is all about. So therefore, this is what praise is all about, why they're singing Shira. They realize the whole story, including all the trouble, all the death, all the persecutions, all the difficulties, was really a way for them to be able to kind of reach this point of crossing the sea and praising God and seeing God's power. You sing the Shira Malos, right, on Shabbos. Shira Malos, B'shuv Hashem Shivat Zion Hayinu K'cholmim. Someone want to translate the pasuk before I tell you what Nesiva Shalom says? What do we say? Shira Ma'alot, B'shuv Hashem Shivat Zion, when the Jewish people came back from Zion, God brought them back to build the second temple. Hayinu K'cholmim, we were like dreamers. We didn't believe it. So says Nesiva Shalom here and in other places, the K'cholmim means when God will bring us back to Israel, we'll be like the dreamers who realize the dream has come true. The dream of your life. Hainu Ki Yosef Balach Halamot. Who is the dreamer in the Bible? Joseph. Now, what happened to Joseph? He didn't have such a good life at the beginning. Terrible life. The end of the story was, what happens to Joseph? He becomes the viceroy.
Second in command.
Right. So if you had asked Joseph when he was scrapping with his brothers, what kind of life do you have? He'd say bad.
Yeah.
You tell Joseph he's languishing in the jail in Egypt. What kind of life do you have? He'd say bad. You tell Joseph in the end of his life, when he's the viceroy, what kind of life did you have? He said, I wouldn't want to trade it for $1 million. I had the best life in my world. But he couldn't have gotten there without the trouble before.
The Gemara has a theme on that, and you see with Nachum Ish Gamzu, Akiva, what looks bad at the moment,
it's going to be,
have to wait until the end.
Correct. Right. That's the same story. Same idea. And therefore, that's what Nesiva Shalom is saying. That's what happened to Joseph. So what are we saying, by the way, and this becomes a little bit of Rav Teichel going to be put in here. I don't think Rav Teichel says this, but the Medrash says, well, the Nesiva Shalom says, B'shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion Hayinu K'cholmim, when God will bring us back to Zion. Not talking about the second temple, he's talking about the final temple. We will be like dreamers, the dreamer of Joseph, whose dream actually came true, but it had all kinds of rocky bumps before that. When he got to the end, he says, my life is a dream. This is my dream life I have. Now, 1 second. The Jewish people at the sea are going to say the same thing. We thought we had a really rocky past. We had difficulty being slaves and difficulties and death and persecutions and hard work, yada, yada, yada. But this forced us to come to the sea to see God's power to drown the Egyptians. That's the Shira, yes.
Tie it in. Back to Amunah. That's why you need Amunah for all of this to happen.
Correct.
Without it, you're finished.
Good.
That's the point.
Excellent. Hold on. This is exactly where we're going. So that Amunah is really about leading to this Amunah. And then we're actually going to point out the two types of Amunah. But you'll see in a moment what you're saying is that's why you need the Amunah to reach the stage. So, but let's hold on to this. Good point. Excellent. So Lamadrigazu, this is 2 lines at the end of that page. Lamadrigazu Higio Yisrael B'Kriyat Yamsuf, and this is the level the Jewish people at Kriyat Yamsuf. They were at the highest level of reflection. We'll go 10 minutes. I just want to finish up this piece. Because the rabbis say that the Jewish people at Sinai had a clearer vision of the role of the Almighty, the power of the Almighty, the existence of the Almighty, than even Ezekiel, who was given the vision of the Kisei HaKavod, the divine throne. V'nochachula wrote, this is Kuf Yud Bet on the top, V'nochachula wrote, Shekol Gulut Mitzrayim V'chol Yisrim Shesavlu Sham, all the troubles they had there, V'chol Koshia Shibud Shishlim Atakates, everything that ended up bringing to the end of the exile in Egypt, Hakol Yalavim Al Gula Shkil Gadol Azeh Shleik Moto. This is all to bring them to see this magnificent power and appearance and recognition of the role of Hashem. Shululei Hazichuch, if not for the filtering, which they were filtered or cleaned through all the troubles and yisurim and difficulties and persecution in Egypt. So therefore, this is what it's all about. The first people to sing Shira, to recognize that all of life is about reaching that point. The problem is sometimes we don't see that moment, but they saw the moment. That's why they said Shira. So all the other people could not see this entire picture together. They would see different pieces of God's immanence, but not an entire picture as the Jewish people saw at the Kriyat Yamsuf. Now, why is it called Vayaminu B'Hashem? V'zeu shomro v'yamin b'Hashem. This is why it says they believed in Hashem. When they believed in Hashem, asisigo madrigam yuchedet shugila shchina. By believing Hashem, this is what Jeff said before, they reached the level where they would see God's presence. Giloy Amunah, the gods are showing what the Amunah led to them. And now he says the two types of Amunah. Hinei be'amunah yeshnei yonim. There's two types of Amunah. Stay with this because this is something new. Yesh Amunah kamashma. The word Amunah means to believe. Shemamin b'Hashem. I believe Hashem. I believe God is a creator, a borei, a manhig. I believe God rules the world, l'chol b'ruim, for everything. That's belief. That's without seeing God. V'yesh emunah miloshin imun. And then there's emunah that's like saying amen. Yes, it is. I guarantee it. For sure. I recognize it. Sheyesh lo imun b'Hashem yitbarach. Emunah and amen are the same root. That I see and I visualize and I assent. How would I say that? I agree. I support. I recognize. I'm in. Right? Me too. That's what imun and amen, and amunah is the second type of amunah. I commit, or I accept it complete. I accept it and I visualize it. I give my approval. Shekol hanagat Hashem yitbarach kula lo tova. That everything that God does is for the good. So the one is I believe there's a God. The second is I believe that there's a God whoever does everything for good. V'yamnam kvar b'Mitzrayim nemar v'yaminam. In Egypt, one of the first chapters of Exodus, when Moshe spoke to them, the Israelites, it said vayamein ha'am. They had emunah, vayamein. So they already had emunah on Hashem. They had the first level. At Kriyat Yamsuf, on the other hand, they saw God's presence in the words when they said, "This is my God, and I will beautify Him." The whole story was about God's divine involvement with our lives. God was really setting him up to come to see the good. They were left with great riches, and they had the Giloy Gadol. They saw God's presence at the sea. They reached the second level of emunah. So the first kind of emunah is believing without seeing. The second kind of emunah is now that I see it, I really believe it for sure. Everything God did was for them for good. And then then they realize they're God's son who loves them. So it's not about fearing God as much as loving them as well at the same time. So what were they afraid of? Because of this Giloy Shechina, they sang praise. Shira al Havar, praise, they sang praise to God on the past. V'shira al Atid, V'shira al Havar, on the past, the future, and the present. God does everything really for the good. Because what does Shira really come from? Shira comes from the heart. Shira novat mitoch leiv shalem haganagat the borei. The heart is the good feeling that what God rules the world. Sheshalem bargashato alavar v'ovev shalem b'min alatid. God, you feel good about the past, the present, the future with God. You know that kol hanagat hakadosh baruch hu movila likrat tov. That whatever God does, it does for good. Ukamosh matzino, and this is this you probably never heard about. You'll never thought about it for a moment. When we say Friday night, we say Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos. After Kabbalat Shabbat, Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos. Yes? What's the next word? Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos? Tov lo dos Lashem. It's good to praise God. I have emunah on you in the morning and in the evening. So the whole Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos doesn't really talk about Shabbos. It talks about praise of God. So in other words, the whole Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos that we say right after Shlecha Dodi, Shekol Tochen HaMizmor Harak Tov Lo Dod Lashem Elazam L'Shimcha Yon, to sing, to praise God, to sing His great name, Ma Godlu Masechu Hashem, how great are your acts, Ki Simachtani Hashem Folech, you've made me happy with your acts, V'siyam HaMizmor, in the end of that paragraph, Lagid Ki Yashar Hashem Tzriv V'Lasabol, God is straight, God is good. Everything God does is going to be properly good. This is Mizmor, just skipping the end of the paragraph, this is Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos. This is what they recognize. That is specifically why it's called Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos. And just to kind of digress for a moment, why is this the Shira we say for Shabbos? Why is this the Shir Shel Yom for Shabbat? It doesn't talk about Shabbat. Because Shabbat is the one day that you have an opportunity to think about what God does. The rest of the week you're too busy. In other words, the Nesiv Shalom writes down in another place that the whole reason this is the Shir Shel Yom HaShabbos, because Shabbos is the day that you commune with Hashem, you think about Hashem, you reflect upon Hashem, and the more you think about Hashem, you realize God does everything for the good. So you want to thank Hashem. So, and this is really why. So, what are they afraid of now? And what's the great hand? The great hand, not the strong hand. Because, just skip through this for a moment, because in Kriyat Yam Suf, they saw not the strong arm of God, they realized the kind arm of God, the arm of Chesed. They saw the fact that everything that God does is really meant for the good. That's why it's called Yad HaGedolah and not Yad HaChazaka. And now what were they believing in Hashem and Moshe? Skipping to the next paragraph on the left column. V'yomru v'yaminu b'Hashem of Moshe Avdo yesh lomar al dat ma shekasu b'divrei Shmuel al pasuk v'yar Elokim es b'nei Yisrael v'yeda Elokim u'Moshe hayaroeh. They realized that Moshe himself, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew what's going to be with the Jewish people, and they understood that Moshe as well understands what's going to be with the Jewish people. Moshe recognized when he became the leader, when he went down to speak to the people, they recognized that Moshe understood that this was going to have a happy ending for the Jewish people, and that's why they put together. So what are they afraid of? They should be loving Hashem. So they were afraid, just to skip through all this in a little bit quickly, so what were they afraid of? Vayiru et b'nei Yisrael Hashem, why were they in awe? They didn't want to lose this. They loved Hashem, but they were afraid they might lose this as well. And so this idea is everything is going on here. They reach this level to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that everything in life is really good. And I'm just going to skip to one more paragraph on the next page in Kuf Yud Gimel, where he kind of summarizes this up. On the right side of Kuf Yud Gimel, on the top, on the right, Vagila Shekriyat Yam Suf U'Nitzchi, the divine awareness of Hashem takes place at the Red Sea is forever. That every Jew has the ability to believe that the world is not natural with the Jewish people. Everything is above nature. Everything is God works within, it is working for the Jewish people. If it's too hard for you to do that, if you can't reach that because you're not at that level of belief, you're not at that level of acceptance, and you can't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in your world, so then what do you do in order to do that? So then you can reach it, so you have to do as much as you can, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you along. This is what the Kriyat Yam Suf is really trying to teach us. That's what it says for the rest of it. So you got to try to do your ishtadlut, to try to believe in Hashem, to try to recognize that Hashem is there, and then if you have that, you'll say the Shir and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you see it as well.
All good.
Except you don't see it.
I do.
Yeah.
Except, Moshe, here's the story of life.
Right.
Living in the moment can be extremely painful. In hindsight, you look back 10 years, very painful. Fine, I learned Hashem was there.
But at the moment, it's very difficult. Yes.
These people, these Hebrews, at the moment of Yam Suf, they were having heart attacks. They were scared.
Right before, at the moment before.
Yes.
Yes, of course.
The moment is I don't care how much belief you have. Life is tough.
Yeah.
But they had it much better than we are having it.
But the truth
it's tough.
The truth is the Jewish people survived. The Jewish people survived very difficult existences throughout all the ages because of this emunah.
Right, we don't see it.
Without that emunah, if they lived in the moment, they couldn't have survived.
We only have the first.
And whatever enemy rose up against us couldn't wipe out that internal emunah.
That's a big opinion.
That's why the second part of the
yes,
is
correct.
basically commitment. I commit that. Okay, this is it.
But the point of it being, what was the key? The key to the story is not reading about the Egyptians, reading about the level the Jewish people were at.
If you do, then no matter what happens,
Take a 5-minute break.
It's all good.